Hello, folks, and welcome to Totally Tank, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. I'm Rob.
And hello, I'm John, and this is episode 75, recording and streaming live on 18 October 2025. And today we're talking about the GOAT again, the greatest of all time, the Centurion. Time has passed, and we want to revisit this magnificent tank, this time with better sound and fewer barking dogs. For those who did hear the audio-only version of the Centurion episode that we did in 2020, it was our first effort at a remote recording because of COVID restrictions, and we were in a lockdown. And Rob just used a really cheap consumer-grade microphone that worked perfectly, and I tried to use a very expensive microphone through a mixing board and mixed up my levels, and the thing... anyway, I sounded like a dalek, and it was terrible. And so here we are, trying to do better. All right, someone called Benzie has joined us saying they're tuning in to say hi to their dad who watches the podcast. Hi, Dad, it's Mercedes. Surprise. Okay.
Good on you. All right,
Okay.
so yeah, we encourage you to still listen to episode 21 on the Centurion, as we cover a lot of good stuff in that episode that we're probably not going to touch on again today.
Sure. Now, sorry, excuse me.
We're a little bit,
Got a bit of a cough going on.
raced at the last minute here when we've realised we don't have a poll. We thought, right, we'll get the best poll going that we can right now. So we encourage you all to jump into the poll and let us know what the best thing is about this Centurion.
Now, Alan's asking, do we like gladiator movies? Well, I love gladiator movies. I'm pretty sure Rob does as well. You know, and
Rusty getting out there, but he's slaughtering all those bloody toilets.
anything Roman Empire. So Gladiator 2, I had an enormous problem with the way they portrayed Caracalla as a simpering pervert. He might have been a pervert, but he was built like a bruiser and he ruled for years and did a lot of good things. So anyway, that's my beef with Gladiator 2.
And yes, Hans, I think everybody should get their own beer tube, or at least share a beer tube with friends, and you can go around and have a watch party of Totally Tanked and try and keep up.
They are quite nice at parties and barbecues as well. You got the little chilling tube that runs down the middle, and you're just not having to run to the fridge all the time. Cool. All right, so I've got a question for you, Rob, and for the audience. Now, we all know that Centurion was the greatest tank ever, proven in combat to be superior to all its contemporaries. My question for you and the audience is why? What made it better? The gun was being mounted in tanks from mid-World War II. The engine had been used from 1944 in both Cromwell and Comet. The armour was not spectacular. Even when upgunned and up-engined, other tanks had the same technology. The top speed wasn't great. The range was really bad. So what was it that made it better than the rest, especially when you consider the horrifically bad heritage of British mid-war tanks?
So I'll come up with an answer as we go through. I think at the end, I think I've got an answer.
Now, if you're watching on the live stream, we'd love to get your theories in the comments as we go on. And it will surprise no one that I've got some ideas of my own, and we'll get to those as we rumble on like a Centurion.
All right. Name of the tank is the FV4007. Brackets A41, close brackets. Centurion was designed as a British heavy cruiser tank, which is why it started with a C. In South Africa, it became the Oliphant, and Israel called it the Shot. In Jordan, it was the Tariq, and in Singapore, the Tempest. Sweden, they had it as the Stridsvagn 81, and in Switzerland, the Panzer 55. It was produced over 16 years and has been in service since 1945 to present day. It's still going.
Present day is a few asterisks on that, but I mean, yeah, essentially.
It's still going. All right. Stats.
Now, we've got some folks who've joined us on the line. Cody Disney says, hello from Oregon. Nice to catch us. We're loving all the protest frogs in Portland, Cody.
Love the frogs.
Catmus is noting the Australian Centurion never had the L7, so they couldn't vote for that in the poll. It makes you wonder why we even bothered with Leopard when we could have just put the L7 in the sense and kept them going. Anyway, right, and Obliteron's joining the Oregon contingent, and Jonas Golden's here. Hello, Jonas.
And just remember, if you want to march for your no kings, go right ahead. We've got a king, and I guess he's not doing anything stupid at the moment. So
he's just stripped the Duke of York of his title. So go king.
But that's us, not you guys.
Maybe you should have a proper king. All right.
Stats. Let's get into they built 4,423 of Centurions. It was produced from 1946 to 1962, plus the prototypes that were built in 1945. Finished in 1945. Yep.
I mean, there were 6 of them that were deployed to Europe days before the end of the war, but never saw combat.
Yes.
Yeah, it would have been a bad day to be a German coming up against Centurion at the very end, though.
There you go. And Warwick's here.
Hey,
g'day Warwick. Weight's 50 tonnes. Started out lower and went higher and so forth, but 25 feet long, 11 feet wide, and 10 feet high. Crew of 4: commander, gunner, loader, and driver. Armour 2 inches on the sides, 3 inches on the front, and 6 inches on the turret front.
I think the 6 inches on the turret front is probably an important thing to note for success. That's a lot of armour, but just on the turret front. So firing from hull down or in what do they call it, defilade, it was an extremely tough target when all you could shoot at was the front of the turret.
There you go. Main gun started out with the 17-pounder, which is a 76.2 millimeter gun. Then went up to the 20-pounder gun, which is 84 millimeters, and then eventually in 1959 the 105 millimeter L7 gun.
Now I only discovered while I was researching this, because the 20-pounder was always a bit of a funny weapon. It seemed always a bit like an interim weapon. And it turns out the L7 was actually an evolution of the 20-pounder, and to some extent was a bored-out 20-pounder. The 20-pounder is actually a much more important weapon than you'd think, and the L7 didn't just spring magnificent and perfect out of a shed in Britain. So yeah, there we go.
All right, all of which had rifle barrels. Then you had the secondary weapons. It started out with the 20mm Polston autocannon in its own ball mount. It was not coax. As one of the vehicle trial vehicles, and there were other trial configurations which we'll touch on later.
That 20mm, I mean, it's like, they've got a cannon and then another cannon. And I mean, the British were really in love with 20mm autocannons by the end of World War II, and then they'd done a lot of research that for fighter planes, the 20mm autocannon, particularly with exploding shells, was much more effective than 50 cals or 303s.
Then they mounted a coax Baser MG with, and then a combination 50 cal spotting machine gun and a 30 cal coax machine gun. So the 50 cal, you'd put one round in, you'd fire that off, you hit your target, then the 17-pounder or the 20-pounder gun would then hit your target, or even the L7 would then hit your target there. So you didn't have to waste any main rounds to figure out what you were shooting at. But you could also put the brass in it and fire off a number of rounds from the 50 cal if you needed to. But the main thing for firing the machine gun was using the 30 cal coax. The engine was the Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 petrol engine, producing 650 horsepower, with later foreign versions swapping out the fuel-hungry Meteor for various types of big American diesel engines.
I will talk more about Meteor. I've got that in the script for later.
Yeah. Gearbox, we got the 5-speed Merritt Brown crash gearbox with 2 reverse gears. Suspension was the modified Horstman, and had 2 internal fuel tanks which would carry 120 imperial gallons.
Oh, a better sort of gallon then.
Yeah. Which could be complemented by a 200-gallon monowheel trailer fuel tank if you hate yourself, or you could strap on a 100-gallon armoured fuel tank to the rear of the tank. The range was, with just the internal fuel, was only 60 miles on the road. So very, very short distance, just on 100 k's, and with a speed of 21.5 miles per hour or 7 miles per hour in reverse, which again is twice as fast as the previous British tanks. So not bad.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a great top speed, particularly with something that started its design as a cruiser. And it was certainly, that Merritt Brown gearbox was doing a lot of work, taking the tearaway power of the Meteor engine and turning it into the torquey, low-speed power of the Centurion. And
welcome to Martin from Germany.
Hello, Martin.
Martin E. Thank you for joining us. All right, then we get into development and design. Design started in 1943 under the direction of the Australian. He wasn't a Sir at that stage, but he became Sir Claude Gibb. But it was mainly William Robotham who championed the engine and the tank, trying to get the War Office to figure out what they actually wanted. As we said previously in our previous episode, he ended up having to quit a few times before they actually started trying to build a good tank. Every time he quit, they'd have to drag him back in, and they'd actually start listening to him again.
Now, we've spoken particularly in the Cromwell episode about the terrible influence of Viscount Nuffield on British mid-war tank production. And it's significant from about 1943, when the writing was on the wall for the fascists. Nuffield stopped meddling in British industrial policy, and suddenly good tanks just appeared out of nowhere. It's quite a coincidence, Rob.
Yeah. The main requirement for the Centurion was to be, it had to have enough armor.
Sorry, I just want to go back. Alan's asking, did you say the range was 60 miles? Yes, Alan, we said 60 miles. It was terrible. The external fuel tanks did help, but that's also why they invented their stupid one-wheel trailers.
As we've, you've got to remember that it could only be filled up from jerry cans. It couldn't. You couldn't fill it up.
If they were lucky, it was jerry cans and flimsies, but you know.
Well, no, they had jerry cans by that stage. So I figured out jerry being the German, how the Germans built their petrol tins, and so everybody realised that these things are really good, and that's why they're called jerry cans. It was built. It was designed to have enough armour to withstand a hit from a 88mm gun from the front. But with a 40-ton weight limit, but they only had a 40-ton weight limit so they could make the tank out of, because that was the weight limit on the transport trailers that they were using. Eventually, they realised that they would not build something to withstand an 88 at 40 tons, so came to the amazing conclusion to build bigger transport trailers, getting them to up to 45 and then 50 tons.
I love how at this stage in the war, the British was suddenly like, you know what, we don't need to be limited by things. We can design other things. Like, we don't need to let the railways tell us that our tanks have to teeny tiny turret rings.
They also decided to ignore the railway car width limitations of 10 foot 3 inches and built it out to 11 feet wide. Well, close to 11 feet wide, depending on. Anyway.
All right, I want to talk quickly about the Rolls-Royce Meteor, Rob. We've talked about Meteor before, but let's cover the ground again for folks who haven't seen everything we've ever done. So, at the start of the war, the British reasonably sensibly limited their high-performance engines to aircraft use because planes were more important than tanks. I hate to say it, but it's probably true. Most of their aircraft engines were crap, so they were very lucky that Rolls-Royce had produced the superlative Merlin. Merlin powered the fighters, it powered the bombers, it was in very high demand. And Robotham realised that the requirements of aviation engines were extremely high. And, that's for a good reason. A failed engine in a tank means the crew has a long walk home. For a plane in the air, it means both the plane and the pilot are likely to be lost. But the aviation standards meant there were a lot of parts which weren't up to aviation use, but would be just fine in tanks, which is where Meteor came in. And at one point, they were literally pulling crashed Hurricanes out of hillsides and stripping the engines down for use in Meteor. So factory duds, and then just aviation engines that had reached their hours and would require an expensive overhaul could just be turned straight into a Meteor engine in a tank, and a brand new one gets installed in the plane. So that was a little bit of a breakthrough for the British that suddenly meant they had high power engines available for tanks from about 1943 onwards. First, they put it in Cromwell, which was much too light for the power of the engine, which is why you got flying Cromwell pictures everywhere. Misuse of that power, really. Then there was Comet, which was actually an excellent tank in general. And finally, they used it to power Centurion, which, as we're going to discuss, worked out pretty well. Interestingly, Ukraine's Flamingo missiles here in 2025 are using jet trainer engines that have exceeded their flight hours and are being sold cheap, because it works just fine for a one-way journey. So that thinking of finding expired air engines to use in other military uses continues to this day. And part of the aviation heritage of the Meteor was having redundant magnetos at opposite ends of the engine, which does allow the engine to keep going with reduced power even after one end getting badly damaged. And, driving home slowly still beats abandoning the vehicle and walking. Rob, let's go back for you for the rest of the tank.
Right, modified Horseman suspension. So again, it was more external suspension rather than just being internal. So it allowed it more space inside the tank, and also allowed them to do any repairs on the suspension on the outside of the tank. But also very good cross country was the important thing about it. And allowed them to move around and provide the mobility of the tank that they really needed. Yeah,
Horseman doesn't give you the smoothness of torsion bars, but it does give you the interior volume of the tank and ease of maintenance. And with a tank with the 21 mile an hour top speed, you maybe don't need the torsion bars.
Yeah. And thanks, Chris Morton, from joining us from the Ipswich in the UK.
Hey, thank you, Chris.
All right. Then we got the larger turret ring. So the 74-inch turret ring versus the 69-inch turret ring for the Sherman, which was basically one of the larger turret rings during the war, made the tank able to withstand the test of time, as they were able to upgrade the gun over the years and include as much armour as they wanted on the turret. The armour at the front was well sloped on the hull, still fronted on the lower front glacis than the Europeans preferred. Read a few notes on that and how they said it was too thin on the lower front glacis. And then someone put forward the idea that this was a design mindset of the Brits, stemming from the Duke of Wellington. Duke of Wellington, where you'd stand at the top of the hill and on the reverse slope of the hill, and then shoot down at the advancing frogs, and they cannot hit your legs or your underbelly. I don't give it much credence, but I do like the premise of the idea that.
I mean, it's using tanks hull down was not something the British invented for Centurion. That was a pretty well established use of a tank since they put the turret on the FT-17.
I just like the idea that somebody said yes, because the Brits always under armour their lower front glacis, because the Duke of Wellington says you stand at the top of the hill and you shoot down from there. You can't get shot in the middle.
I mean, Challenger 2 still has an under armoured bottom glacis as well. So yeah.
Well, anyway, then there was the infamous donation of a T-54A during the Hungarian Revolution to the British embassy in Budapest.
When we say donation, it was literally driven into the embassy grounds, and the army attaché then suddenly found he had 24 hours to take a lot of measurements, and he wasn't trained to do that, and he did stuff up the measurements and reported the T-55 as.
I only came here to go to the opera.
It was not as well armoured as he reported it was, so they overbuilt the L7, which was part of the.
Yeah. But because of that, they realised the 20-pounder gun couldn't penetrate the front armour and the turret armour of the T-54, and so they needed to and this was in 56. And because of that, they needed to up-gun the NATO tanks, and that was led directly to the development of the L7 105mm gun.
Now, gang, if you're watching on the stream, do give us a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, that helps too.
Yeah. Alrighty. Here we go, some fun notes. All right, the 20mm Polston autocannon came about as the Polish design team evacuated to the UK when Poland was invaded in 1939. They then worked with the Brits to build the Polston. In comparison to the 20mm Oerlikon cannon, it was a fifth the cost and had half the number of parts, making it cheaper and faster to build with comparable reliability and effectiveness.
Now, just want to note, Rob's figured out how to pronounce Oerlikon, so it turns out he is capable of growth and learning.
I think I can revert. It's only taken me 6 years or whatever. Anyway, 20 pilot models were ordered with various armaments in combinations. The first 10 with the 17-pounder and the 20mm Polston gun, of which half had a Beza still can't see Beza machine gun in the turret rear, and the other half had an escape hatch in the turret rear.
So they were still playing with some silly concepts at that stage of development, but they got there in the end.
Right, another 5 had the 17-pounder, a forward Beza machine gun, and an escape hatch in the rear, and another 5 had the quick-fire 77mm gun and a driver-operated hull machine gun. That would be fun. I'm going to hose you down by turning the
tank.
All right.
Daka. I've never heard of the QF-77 though, so that was a weapon that didn't set the world on fire.
I'm assuming it was just a 76 that they called a 77.
Oh, hang on. We're talking about the Vickers high-velocity gun they put in Comet. That could be it.
Probably.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Whilst not a very high top speed, it was very manoeuvrable cross-country and quick off the mark, forwards and backwards. The quick reverse was demanded after the issues the Allies had in Italy and being caught in sunken roads by the Nazis and not being able to reverse out quick enough.
So this is where Centurion shone. Wasn't in getting to 20 miles an hour, at which point it couldn't go much quicker. It was its speed from 0 to 5 in forward or reverse was actually very fast because it was incredibly torquey the way they'd set up the transmission and the engine. And it turned out that first 5 miles per hour is actually where you really want your speed in getting your tank out of the position it's in before the enemy shoots you.
All right, now strap in folks, this is going to be a bit of a lengthy story about the Australian Centurions. And I want to say a big thank you to the Steel Thunder website and Colin Filtness, whose tripod website, built in 2004, is still going and has a great collection of stories about the Australian Centurion tanks, including their operations in Vietnam and their after service when they've returned to Australia.
I could not believe a tripod website was still running in 2025, Robert. Yeah. I played around with a tripod website back in like 1997, and It's probably, I mean, it's definitely abandoned. I don't have that email address anymore, so God knows how I'd even go about reclaiming it. But
Anyway,
there we go. This one's still going.
Cole set the site up to support the Victorian Vietnam Veterans Museum on Phillip Island, which is going strong. And I hope Cole is going strong. I've reached out to him and the Vietnam Veterans Museum about their stories and wanted to honour what they've done for Australia and share some of what is on Steel Thunder. The site is Centurion mbT.tripod.com because their stories are too good not to share. All right, here's a fun one about cutting up an old Centurion for scrap. So the 30 and 50 cal machine guns were side by side in the turret, and when a stoppage occurred, the operator waited for a small period of time to see if the heat of the barrel would cook off the round. If not, the round was then extracted by pulling the bolt back. The rounds do not always fall into the catch bag on the side of the guns, and would often end up on the floor where they could roll around and disappear from sight. In action, many went this way, and the owners still pull rounds out from under the floor today. So at the front of the tank, in front of the driver, is where essentially you've got a wine rack system where the
for the ammunition, the rounds.
For the tank, the gun rounds are actually stored there. So basically, they can reach in and pull them out from under there. So when these unfired rounds from the 30 or 50 cal get ejected out, they can roll around underneath there, and you can't really get under there. So in action, so they roll around under the floor, and they're still there today. So when the owner of an old tank started in on them with the on his tank with a thermal lance for scrap. So
a gas axe, but
yep. He was part way through the driver's compartment when there was an almighty bang, and then another as two 50 cal rounds got cooked off. And searching through the compartment afterwards, he then found another 3 live rounds under the wine rack storage of the 20-pounder ammo racks. So beware the ghost of the Centurion. Yes. More learnings from this site include that a liquid-cooled petrol tank motor is actually quite quiet and is a pleasant surprise after time around radials, engines and diesels. V12 motor is quite smooth to listen to. Climbing aboard a running Centurion is easier said than done. The bow plate of the Centurion is quite high, and there is not a lot to use as a foot purchase. And never climb a switched-on tank from the sides on the tracks, as it could roll at any stage, trapping your foot. So approach the vehicle from the front so the driver could see you coming along the vehicle's centerline, i.e. not in line with the tracks. It may be safe, but it is damn awkward. What noise there was appeared to come from the engine fans and the track squeaks, dry pin types, and the track squeaks was very pronounced with even the slightest steering correction. The Centurion does not have a turret lock, meaning if you are driving around the side of a hill, the weight of the barrel will turn the turret to point down the hill. You either have to put the barrel in the travel lock on the engine deck or power up the auxiliary motor and hold the turret in place that way. So that's just fun little bits to learn about. And only the early versions have the magneto switch for the down-rated Merlin airplane engine. The switches, gauges, warning lights, etc. all located wherever it suited the designer to put them and not where the driver would actually want to access them. All right. Steering is not like an American vehicle. With English vehicles, you are controlling output to one side when turning, not braking a track to turn. So pulling back on the 2 levers in the American fashion does not actually have a braking or turning result. It just causes the interlock to come into effect, and neither lever will operate till you relax pressure on one of them. Neutral only means that it won't go in a straight line. Essentially, if you don't want it to move, switch the engine off, leave it in gear, and put the handbrake on. With the engine 20 feet back and being very quiet, it's hard to tell when to change up gears with your head out without experience of how to drive the tank. And you don't want to look down at the tacho to see what the revs are doing. So,
I mean, just things like, if you're out in broad Australian sunshine, looking down into the interior of the tank, I imagine it'd be quite hard to even read the displays.
All right, and welcome to Finn Sigler-McCann.
Oh, hey, Finn. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, with these notes about the Centurion steering and gearbox, we go to another story from a fellow named Phil Hastings, who bought himself a Centurion, it's called Armageddon, for running around on his farm in New South Wales. After first getting it set up, he took it out for a bit of a spin and was going up a hill and then turned to head across the slope. He then found out that the Merritt Brown 5-speed crash transmission gearbox was designed to allow a tank to power turn in neutral for manoeuvring was only for level ground and not the side of a slope. that's when the tank then turned downhill and ran off out of control at a much more than 21 miles per hour.
We often say that, tanks only really reach their top speed down a steep hill, but yeah.
He couldn't engage the first or second gear to slow it down, and no amount of pulling on the brakes would stop the 50-ton tank from rolling down the hill. Plowing through 3-foot-wide gum trees, the tank eventually crashed sideways into a creek bed.
I reckon they've grown a few inches every time that story is told, but sure.
Crashed sideways into a creek bed, and Phil climbed out, luckily, with just a cut on his arm.
He's very lucky. He could have died in that.
Oh, yeah, he knows. Which is when he learned from the book Centurion by Simon Dunstan. To change down, it was necessary to double declutch, but should the driver fail to engage the gear from neutral, the results could be dire. The vehicle might career down the hill and out of control, and no amount of brake application would stop it as the brake linings burnt out in short order.
This is a very British design. Very British design.
This idiosyncrasy was known to Centurion drivers the world over, and each nation has its own pithy catchphrase, such as "doing it angels" and "the Mexican overdrive." So, yes, he learned that the hard way. Phil was able to write the Sideways Armageddon with some help, and the Centurion roared back to life and drove out of the creek bed and back to the farm. There was some work to be done, but it was mostly cosmetic, and the tank was back in working order. There you go.
Yes. Another reason why, don't go driving tanks on your own. It's, many of farmers died driving the tractors on their own as well.
Yeah.
But, All right, Rob, what have we got now?
All right, and some other stories. We've all heard about that. Sorry. Most people will have heard about the Australian Centurion tank called the atomic tank that was blown up by a nuclear blast after arriving in Australia in 1953 out at our nuclear testing site in Maralinga in South Australia, and then went on to fight in Vietnam, and before returning home to Australia is now being used as a gate guard for one armoured regiment in Edinburgh, South and Adelaide. Anyway, some other stories about the atomic tank from those who knew her. She was serial number 169041, and at the time she was called Baby Doll. The story below was written from the 1970s by Ron Saw, a newspaper journalist who had previously been in the Armoured Corps. And these are his words. I first saw Baby Doll standing beside a building near the tank hangars in Puckapunyal in 1955. She was a sorry sight minus her turret and gun. I was told that she had been at Emi Plains for the atomic test and had been parked very close to the atomic bomb that was let off. The story said she'd been left running with all radios on, and they were upset when they went back and saw the motor was not running. But she was only out of fuel, and so once refueled, she was driven away from the site. More to the story is that I was later told was that the decontamination consisted of washing her down with a fire hose. I do not know how true that was, but I, for one, never sat on her and ate my lunch, but many others did.
I mean, there is... I've seen it reported that all the crew they put in the tank to drive it away died quite young from cancer.
Yes.
So, it wasn't great.
The LAD, I'm assuming some sort of used her for a time as a tow tank. So it'd be around Puckapunyal, and was later, at a later date, a turret was fitted back and she was back in use. Later, the Army decided to prove that the Centurion was not only big and dangerous, but also mobile, and that she could get herself around in the event of a running war. So in 1958, they saddled up Baby Doll and moved her from Puckapunyal to Singleton, over 600 miles. And while I don't say Hannibal had it easier getting the elephants over the Alps, I'm certain he didn't have it much harder. She smashed just about everything she touched. Her great steel tracks with 50-odd tons of press to press them down broke up the roads and pavements. She depressed so much the Hume Highway that for a while it seemed likely to be more profitable about forgetting about repairing it and simply fill it with water and rename it the Hume Ship Canal.
I mean, they should have. The Hume Ship Canal would be awesome.
All right, so the Hume Highway goes from Sydney to Melbourne. It's about, 1,100 Ks? No, about 900 Ks. 1,000 Ks?
Yeah, it takes about 12 hours to drive.
Yeah,
but
anyway,
yes.
It's a long way.
It's the central arterial of Australia. All the trucks rumble up and down it.
Back in those days, it was single lane both ways.
Oh, it was murderous stretch of road.
And it was not great. Anyway, she frightened the horses, the cattle, the sheep, and the hogs. Fowls fluttered, screeching, and her advanced farmers threatened her with shotguns, and their wives threw their aprons over their heads and hid in the barns. As my newspaper's official tank watcher, I dutifully reported every tragic embarrassment, and at a time when I felt sure that nothing more delicious could possibly happen, Baby Doll got herself stuck fast in Tools Bridge, an overgrown culvert 5 miles from Gundagai. So, about a third of the way there, yeah. What I wrote about that was not I suppose, great journalism, but it was at that point, Baby Doll, the Army's wayward tank, suffered a fate worse than death on Tools Bridge, 5 miles from Gundagai at 3:10 p.m. yesterday. Shortly after that, I left. My editor told me to stay with Baby Doll, but he could not see the faces of the crew changing from pink to choleric crimson. He couldn't hear the grinding of their teeth. Editor's note, the Centurions were actually transported on low loaders, as they were not allowed to drive on the roads, but they did have to be unloaded and driven under bridges and then reloaded on the other side, which is where it got caught on the culvert. The crews had long insulated poles to keep the power lines out of the way, and the trip took a very long and exhausting 32 days to go that 600 miles.
You could just about be quicker walking.
All right.
So you could certainly do that trip faster on a bicycle.
We go back to the story. I left her and forgot about her until March 1968 when I came out of an operation in the Long Hai Hills of Vietnam and asked for and was given a bed and a disc of coffee at a fire support base and saw the tanks there. They had not been long there, but they had done splendidly. There were everything there where everything and just about everyone was being smashed and trampled away. It didn't matter how much damage they did to the full roads and bridges. The country at that time of the year was flat and dry, and the tanks were mobile. Later, when the rains came, they would take to the high ground designed to drain into the paddies and keep on moving. But just now, they were giving artillery support to the diggers who were slogging up the side of Hill 323. Drearily named because it was 320 metres high. And there, incredibly, was Baby Doll, a company from 3RAR, which is the Royal Australian Regiment, that's the infantry, under Major Ian Hands of Brisbane, had come in from the sea, killed a few VC, and then gone on to take the hill. As they struggled up the jagged, rocky slopes, Baby Doll had covered them with her long, nosy 20-pounder, laying 30 metres ahead of them, brassing up anything in their path. It was a marvellously accurate weapon, capable of putting a shell into a 4-foot square target at a range of 2,000 metres. As the tankers put it, any closer and it's like shooting fish in a barrel. That 20-pounder can literally knock a man off a log. At one stage of the assault on Hill 323, Baby Doll's commander, Corporal Philip Reeves of Toowoomba, saw movement in a cave mouth above the diggers. At his order, Baby Doll pointed her long snout and gave a bellowing sneeze, and the shell went straight into the cave mouth. There was no more movement. Baby Doll and the rest of her girlfriends had what one might call a distinguished tour of Vietnam. How many North Vietnamese and VC they killed doesn't really matter. Now, as then, it seems more decent to report that they gave protection to the infantry and the infantry loved them.
I think, just quickly, Australia got incredibly lucky in that when we sent the tanks to Vietnam, we still had, at that point, Colonel Don Dunstan, who in World War II had commanded tanks in Bougainville. So he was
the last commander.
He was a very rare, experienced tank commander for jungle warfare. So being able to have this guy still in the army by the time they got to Vietnam and able to, he literally said, well, we've got these tanks here, I know how to use them. And
I know how to use them in jungle. Because 23 years later, he was still a lieutenant colonel and ordering these tanks around. So
he did go on to be governor of South Australia as well.
Yes.
Governor is an appointed, not an elected position in Australia.
Yeah. All right. The army steals itself as Baby Doll sails home. The story continues. Last Friday, they came home on the Japanese freighter Harima Maru, and yesterday the army got around to unloading Baby Doll. Well, the army tried. I went down to Balmain to welcome her. I looked up and down the line of already unloaded tanks sitting on their flat cars waiting to be rolled south to Bandiana, which is where, side note, which is where they would get refurbished. I couldn't see Baby Doll, and then they told me she was still in the hold. She won't start, they said. We need to start her up and move her a bit so we can get the hoisting cables onto her. But she won't start the bitch. We need to have her jump leads to her, and they did. And I'm able to report that Baby Doll, the Army's wayward tank, was jumped in the hold of the freighter Harima Maru at Balmain at 4:15 p.m. yesterday, and Baby Doll was lowered lewdly over the side of the ship, and I stood looking up at her with a warm and happy admiration. I swear she wiggled her behind and winked at me. As long as I'd known her, she had the qualities of a whore. This is the 70s, remember, boys and girls. She'd been obstinate, tawdry, expensive, and dangerous. Many men had known her, and many had found her beautiful. I, as a voyeur, had seen her lose her virtue. I, as a lover, had seen her regain it. Now, yesterday, she was up to her old whorish tricks again. Baby Doll was a sister tank of Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. Further notes on the article. The name of the tank changed over the years. The crew in Vietnam gave her the nickname Sweet Fanny, but she also had the call sign Angelique in 1990, and then Bourbon when acting as the gate guard in Darwin. The atomic tank has now moved to Adelaide with one armoured regiment when they moved there at RAF Edinburgh. And I'm hoping they give it a wine-related call sign like Burgundy or something for being in Adelaide, which is very famous for its wines in South Australia. All right, that was the end of that story. Then we go on to 3 more Centurions were involved in nuclear testing in Australia during the British government's Operation Buffalo. Tests were held at Maralinga in September and October 1956. The operation involved the detonation of 4 separate nuclear devices, codenamed One Tree, Kite and Breakaway, 2 of which, One Tree with a yield of almost 13 kilotons and Breakaway at 10 kilotons, were Redbeard tactical bombs exploded from towers, while Marku and Kite were Blue Danube bombs. The first exploded at ground level and the second released by a RAF Valiant bomber from a height of 35,000 feet. This was the first.
Valiant was a beautiful bomber as well. And obviously the Blue Danube was a air-launched missile.
This was the first aircraft launching of a British atomic weapon. During one of these trials, the 3 Centurion Mark IIIs were placed at roughly 400 metres, 800 metres and 1,600 metres from ground zero, so quarter mile, half mile and 1 mile from ground zero. And even at 400 metres, the blast damage was only superficial, being largely confined to the external sheet metal and was not sufficiently serious to have penetrated the fighting vehicle. The report
to have prevented the vehicles fighting again.
Prevented the vehicles from fighting again. The report of the trial stated that the Centurion was capable of taking heavy punishment at the range and with the weight of bomb used without being disabled to a non-fighting state. One vehicle was quickly made serviceable and drove some 80 miles from the blast. The gun was also test-fired with no recorded loss of accuracy. The fate that might have befallen the luckless crew had at this time not been of this exercise has not been recorded. There we go. So, more than one tank got blown up by.
Now, it's worth remembering as well that a defining feature of Centurion is there's a lot of canvas around the mantlet, and I don't imagine the canvas was surviving these blasts. But
canvas is cheap.
Canvas is cheap. Yep.
Our operators. All right, we're getting to the fun bits. The success of the tank was shown by the number of countries who operated. The USA was the second biggest purchaser of the Centurion, buying 500 of them in 1952 after seeing their success in Korea. However, they didn't operate the Centurions themselves, but instead passed them on to their NATO allies in Europe. The Dutch and the Danes were the most mainly, as the French were doing their own thing, and no one was letting West Germany and Italy build their own tanks just yet. The UK and the Commonwealth nations at the time, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa and India also got Centurions. Then those Middle East countries that the UK wanted money from or just wanted to annoy the French with, which was Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and all of which fought in the Six-Day War on various sides in 1967, plus Kuwait. Then there were sales to Sweden and Switzerland. On the sales and wartime captures, one went to Romania, supposedly. Ceausescu bought one from the Israelis. Singapore bought theirs from India and Israel. Israel got some from Jordan and Egypt, which they captured, and Egypt got some from Israel, which they captured. Somalia purchased 50 from Kuwait. Austria mounted Centurion turrets as static pillboxes, and according to the interwebs, Schwarzenegger drove them when he did his national service in 1965, but it was actually been an M47 pattern. So the interwebs lied to us again, John. And there's another interweb lie is that Lebanon never got any Centurions from Jordan. Also
worth noting, we have quite a few, at least one set of pictures in the slideshow of Centurions in Kubinka, the Russian tank museum. So the Russians probably got theirs from the Syrians, I would guess. But
there you go. Yeah. So there was the interwebs lies a lot. So just realise that, boys and girls. All right. Conflicts. All right.
How many conflicts does a Centurion fight in? All of them.
There you
all
go.
of them.
Anyway,
the whole Cold War.
This one's for you, John.
Okay, hang on. So the Centurion's combat debut was in the Korean War, and they were part of the great advance up into North Korea, up to the Yalu River, at which point the Chinese said, we warned you, we warned you, we warned you, okay, we're coming in. And then you had the Battle of Injim River, which was a desperate holding action retreat. And I mean, 20,000 odd Chinese were killed for the loss of a couple of hundred. The UN forces, which was mostly British and some Americans and South Koreans in this battle. But
we'll just point out that when we say UN forces, we do mean UN forces, and you'll see the tanks from the pictures with other tanks. They have the American white star on the side of them. That was just to indicate that they were part of the UN troops.
Yeah, trying to not be friendly fired.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as part of Indian River was this desperate retreat. Now, Mike's research, which is a website we've accessed before, we love Mike and his research, had this description of the withdrawal, and I think it's well worth reading. On April 25, after the loss of the Gloucesters, it was decided to extract the rest of the 29th Brigade south along Route 11. The Belgian battalion, reinforced by a troop of Centurions, were ordered to hold on long enough to allow the Northumberlands and Ulsters to withdraw, but they were also responsible for protecting the brigade headquarters and the 45 Field Regiment's artillery firing positions. The Northumberlands and Ulsters were supported by a mobile column composed of Centurion tanks, sappers, and every Oxford carrier and half-track that could be found. The Northumberlands and Ulsters convoy, consisting of Oxford carriers, trucks and jeeps, tore down Route 11 as quickly as possible. Small teams of Chinese soldiers sneaked through the paddy fields and drainage ditches. Armed with Molotov cocktails, sticky bombs and pole charges, they tried to run alongside and toss their explosives at the moving British vehicles, exposing themselves to the withering fire from the convoy and the Centurions. The tank commanders stood up in their turret hatches and lobbed grenades at the Chinese. If a vehicle, including tanks, stalled or was too damaged to continue, Centurion tanks would shove it off the road. The men inside would abandon the vehicle and continue their retreat either on foot or climb aboard the next truck or Oxford carrier coming down the road.
It's pretty desperate. For those who don't know, in the Korean War, it was a case of the North Koreans advanced all the way south, and then the UN forces advanced all the way north, and then the Chinese and North Korean forces advanced halfway to the middle. And it was
and that's where they're still waiting.
But it was a lot of movement at very short periods of time.
And part of this retreat that we were just describing was also what became the longest retreat in the history of the US Army. Something that certain Americans who are keen to fight a war with China would do well to remember. China's a lot stronger now than it was in 1950s, and the US is probably not as strong.
Was the Cromwell episode, or one of the other episodes we talked about how Seoul was recaptured and lost four times. Four times as they went through Seoul. And welcome to, is it CI or CL?
Looks like CI, yep.
Yeah, excellent story. Okay, thanks guys. And all right. And I feel that we've covered the Yom Kippur War of 1973 in the Valley of Tears previously, and even the Patton City from the Battle of Asal Uttar from the Indo-Pakistan War of 1965. So
it's worth remembering that the Centurions destroyed so many Pattons that the Indians built a special memorial of wrecked Pattons that their Centurions had destroyed.
And called it Patton City. Yeah. So we'll look at some of the other conflicts, areas where the Centurion was significantly involved, right? But to give an idea of how much the Israelis like the Centurion, we have this. At one time, the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, was able to deploy a total of around 1,000 Centurions, some 25% of the total production figure, of which were eventually equipped with the 105 millimeter L7 gun. Poor maintenance and abuse of the tanks in the Israeli deserts by the largely conscripted crews initially gave the Centurion a poor reputation. A company of Israeli tanks was fired on by Syrian T-55 and T-62 tanks at Nakala in 1964, despite firing some 89 rounds of 105mm ammunition in exchange that lasted 90 minutes. Not one Syrian tank was hit. Things then began to improve when General Israel Tal took command of the Israeli Armored Corps towards the end of 1964, and standards of training and maintenance and discipline rose significantly. They continued to use their Centurions as heavily armoured support vehicles, the Nagmachon APCs, and the Nakpadon armoured recovery vehicles, or the Puma combat engineering vehicles.
It's a funny one. If the crews don't follow the maintenance schedules, tanks don't work very well. And this goes for pretty much any heavy machinery, but it's really noticeable with tanks, certainly with the M1 Abrams. Prior to going into the first Gulf War, the American Army was quite worried about the reliability of the Abrams, but it turns out when troops knew that they were actually going to have to fight in the things, they started doing the recommended maintenance, and wow, stuff actually worked.
And doing the training. Yep. All right, Suez Crisis, 1956. What a bloody mess. Having forced Italy to sell Egypt Shermans, who wanted to give them to Israel. Italy wanted to give their Shermans to Israel, and gotten the US to then give more Shermans to Egypt because they wanted Egypt to win the first. The Brits then wanted Egypt to win the first Arab-Israeli War of 1949. The Brits then sold the first Centurions along with 200 archers in the early 50s to Egypt.
I mean, the Archer was not a great vehicle by the 1950s.
No, but it was still...
It was pretty cool in 1943, but...
it was a self-propelled gun
with a 17-pounder
on a Valentine's chassis. And they already had plenty of Valentines. So. Right. So that was when there was a king in Egypt, and they had a treaty from the 1936 British treaty that allowed Britain to go in there and make sure that everything was fine. But then the king was couped, and Nasser took over. Well, he took over about the second or third time. He was third in line. And Nasser then nationalised the Suez Canal from the Brits and the French. And them allies needed an excuse to send in troops to take control of the canal. But they couldn't just invade because that would be wrong, John. You're not allowed to just invade countries anymore.
Well, you weren't back then. It was funny how in the immediate aftermath of World War II, invading countries was considered to be a very bad thing that no one should do.
So what the Brits and the French did was they teamed up with Israel for Israel to invade, and then the Brits and the French could step in and set up a buffer zone between these two warring parties. The buffer zone would just happen to include the Suez Canal. To be fair, the French were arming both the Israelis as well as the Egyptians, the same as the Brits. When the conflict actually started, the Israelis quickly captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, which had been occupied by Egypt, in October '56. And the Brits landed September. In late October 1956, the Brits landed 93 Centurions, which were listed as would be the key to victory, while the French landed their AMX-13s in early November. The Egyptians kept their Centurions out of the conflict, whether to reduce confusion, or they weren't in the right place, or they were out of service due to lack of parts. I don't know, but probably the latter. The British tanks were very effective in urban warfare in support of the infantry. When told of a ceasefire starting in 5 hours, the British commander, General Stockwell, told the Centurions to take off for the coast and capture as much territory as possible before time was called to improve their bargaining position.
I mean, one of my favourite bits of the Suez Crisis, aside from the...
craziness of it?
Aside from Eisenhower telling the Brits that he wasn't going to intervene if the Soviets nuked them.
There was a British there was an American carrier task force harassing the British naval ships in the Mediterranean. Right, this was all really weird.
Yeah, but one of the cool things was the Israelis took old Mustang fighters and reinforced the leading edge of the wings, and with some extremely brave pilots, used them to cut the telegraph wires between the Egyptian front lines, and that was the kind of out of the box, exciting thinking that led to the exploding pages, I guess. Anyway, but back when we all kind of thought the Israelis were the good guys, oh, how times have changed.
All right, the Soviets and the USA teamed up with Egypt to tell the Brits and the French that they could no longer impose their imperial will on others, as they were now sitting at the little kids' table and not the grown-up table of the Soviets and the USA.
Know your place was the very clear message from Washington and Moscow.
The French and the Brits were forced to withdraw from Sinai and the Suez Canal by the end of the year, along with the Israelis. This little adventure really made a mess of how governments viewed the world. Nasser and Egypt leaning more on the Soviets, but still very chummy with the US. The Brits and the French teaming up with the Israelis to take on the preeminent Arab nation of the time, which is Egypt, but at the same time trying to maintain dominion/close ties to other Arab nations in the area. Plus, the lean on national self-determination without interference from colonial empires for emerging nations, whilst at the same time, the new powers, the USA and the USSR, demonstrated that they were allowed to impose themselves on other nations, such as the suppression of the rebellion in Hungary. So it was really up in the air time.
It was a different world and a time of real flux, and also a time of real principle. Eisenhower wasn't fooling around with his dream of building a world without war, he did a pretty good job and laid the foundation for an incredibly long period of peace. Yeah.
Egypt would later deploy their Centurions against Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967, with most being captured. They then captured a similar number of L-7 gun tanks from Israel during the Yom Kippur War of 1973. All right, the Jordanian Civil War of 1970. Jordan. The problem with Jordan was that there was a mix of Arab and English, essentially. The royals all went to Eden, and they had close ties to the UK.
And I mean, the Jordan Legion, it was all British officers and British equipment. It was.
There was a very huge scandal when the British general of the Legion was sacked and replaced by a Jordanian. So it was like Britain did not like that.
I mean, an ex-girlfriend of mine had a story about when she was at boarding school in Britain and was dashing out of the shower in a towel and bumped into the King of Jordan. But yeah.
There you go. Whose wife is supposedly very beautiful. There you go.
That was that king's father. But
there you go. No. But the nation had an Arab national identity and a large Palestinian population. So when the Hashemite family royals of Iraq and Syria, and the Jordanian family is also a Hashemite family, were toppled, and then Egypt's monarchy was couped, Jordan, which didn't have the oil of Saud, was not sure where things stood. Things did not go well for the kingdom in the Six-Day War of 1967, and by 1970 there were strong feelings within parts of the population that the Hashemites had to go. There was a large Palestinian population and a town of refugees and a number of refugee towns on the border with Israel, where the PLO and other groups, think your People's Front of Judea or the Judean People's Front type of idea, they all had their own acronyms.
It's a bit like Gaza today. There's a lot of different groupings running around.
And it's still there. It's a case of it's in Jordan. They're all agitating against Israel and the Jordanian monarchy, which wasn't squeaky clean either. Plenty of disappearances, but then so were the Brits in Northern Ireland. The PLO fighters were called the Fremen. No, actually, they're called the Fayadeen. Fedayeen, which is close enough to Fremen for my books.
Frank Herbert borrowed heavily from a lot of places. Yeah.
Right. The conflict kept escalating, and it was pretty nasty all around. King Hussein actually had to stop the army from shelling the refugee towns. Eventually, open conflict broke out with Jordan, and then Syrian army within Jordan, and then Syrian army tanks rolled down from the north, claiming to be the PLO. So, sorry, PLO stands for Palestinian Liberation Organization.
For our viewers and listeners who are under 40, yeah.
So it was a big. It was
a big deal.
It was a big deal.
The Australian National University Student Association used to send thousands of dollars a year to the PLO, which was quite a little scandal at the time. But
All right. With 45 Centurions trying to hold, when the Syrian army tanks came down, the Jordanians had 45 Centurions trying to hold back at first 170 T-55s and T-62s, and things did not go well for them. But more Syrian tanks then advanced as Jordan then moved up their M47 Patterns to the front line. An added complication was that Iraq had a large armoured force on Jordan's eastern border, and no one knew which way that force would jump. Plus, Israel was weighing up what would be a better outcome for them. A Palestinian nation in northern Jordan that they could move people to, or was the threat of an emboldened Syria and other Arab nations too much? So they weren't sure what outcome they wanted. And this was big. The Israeli cabinet, who was the female prime minister? I can't remember.
Golda Meir?
Yeah, Golda Meir. She wasn't sure which way they were going to go, and their cabinet split over who they wanted to support in this conflict. In the end, the Iraqis stayed out, and they basically said, we're going to stay on our side of the border, move your troops away so nobody gets shot. The US convinced Israel to carry out, because the Jordanian king was calling up the US saying, we'd really like some help here. Can you give us some help? The US convinced Israel to carry out some maneuvers to scare the Syrians. And after 3 days, the 150 Jordanian tanks were able to slow the 450 Syrian army tanks of the 900 involved.
This is a lot of tanks.
Yeah. And Amman, which is the capital of Jordan, isn't that far from the border of Syria. It's not a great deal of distance. They were able to slow the advance enough for diplomacy and the threats to kick in without provoking the Soviets, who were the main supporters of the Syrians. And so the Syrians then withdrew, and they were saying, "Oh yes, we're all in Syrian army uniforms, but we're all part of the PLO at this stage. So basically, it was,
yes, the 450 tank armoured thrust of the Palestinian Liberation Organisation.
The aftermath was to return to the previous borders, with Jordan recognising the PLO as representing the Palestinian people. But the king then removed any PLO supporters from government positions, mainly Palestinians, what a surprise. And even today, there are no Palestinians over the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Jordanian army. It was
Lieutenant Colonel's still a bit dangerous a rank. Many a coup's been led by a Lieutenant Colonel.
Yeah, I think even Gaddafi was a colonel. Or
he was a colonel. He was a full colonel.
Yeah, that's there you go. So he's not in charge of a formation.
Sure.
All right, they're only. It was a conflict that could have split and destroyed the nation of Jordan, but they were able to stay together and would be much more aligned to the West than other Arab nations. The PLO moved their headquarters to southern Lebanon out of the East Bank, which then troubled their troubles a decade later when the Lebanese civil war kicked off and Beirut and everything else happened in the early 80s. Jordan still has their Centurions in service as armoured personnel carriers with the doors to the front. When we'll get onto those a little bit later.
But they've only got 4, which seems like a VIP transport, doesn't it? Anyway.
There you go.
All right. Let's talk about the models of Centurion. Now, by my count in the pictures, I got to Mark 13. I've got no pictures of higher marks, but they might well exist. There were a lot of them.
There were. But just remember, marks could have /1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There were sub marks as well.
Yes, there were sub marks as well. Okay. Anyway, so for the pilot vehicles, which were their first 20, built in late 44, early 45, they only weighed 42 tons. With the, as we discussed with the weapon configurations of the 17-pounder and the 20mm Polston, a 17-pounder with a Baser machine gun and ball turret at the rear. The rear escape hatches, a Baser machine gun in the coax position, and the one with
just going to jump in, Rob. Hans Vornhat's just gifted us $30, so thank you very much, Hans. We appreciate the beer money.
Beer money for next. Thank you, Hans. All right, and then there was the version armed with the 77mm high velocity gun and the driver operated hull machine gun. Then you get into the actual ongoing versions of the tanks, which was the Centurion Mark I, which is the A41 with the 17-pounder with the 20mm Polston autocannon. Then you get up to the Mark II, which had an up-armoured hull, a fully cast turret, and new commander's cupola. They threw in a coax Baser machine gun, and that was what entered full production in 1946. The Mark III was upgunned to the 20-pounder, which was the 84mm gun, and a slightly shorter hull. That got up to 49 tons, and they added in a turret bomb thrower,
which I've always liked the idea of. For when you're cleaning out infantry, sometimes a mortar's a better weapon than a high velocity tank gun.
Then we got to the Centurion Mark IV, which was the projected close support version with the 95mm close support howitzer that was not built.
That seems like a retrograde step to have a 95mm howitzer, but yeah.
All right, then we get to what became a fairly common one, was the Centurion Mark V, where they introduced the Browning 30 cal coax machine gun and a commander's cupola flex mount for the 30 cal. So you could have a 30 cal in the coax as well as a one for the commander. All right. They also removed the rear escape hatch and the bomb thrower, and its weight crept up to 51 tons. It was in production from 1955. And the Centurion Mark V/1, aka the FV4011, they increased the glacis armor, added the 50 cal ranging machine gun, and then you have the Centurion Mark V/2, which is when they introduced the L7 105mm gun. The next 16 models, I won't go over, but they added infrared night fighting equipment and third internal fuel tanks and other bits and pieces.
And generally from there on, it tends not to be the Meteor engine, but that gets into a whole complicated world.
For the British versions, it still was.
True.
Yeah, it was only the foreign versions. But as I was saying, so that was the British, what came out of the British factories as they were producing up to 1962. So, as I said, there were another 16. And I'm not going to do it because
Life's too short, and we're going to need to wee before that.
Because John wants me to go light on the variants, which we are now up to. And I'm only going to talk about a third of the variants, most of which were the other ones I'm not going to talk about were just foreign variants changing out the machine guns and the engines because like the Dutch wanted their FN mags rather than a 30 cal, whatever else.
Meddy's joined the stream. Hello, Meddy. Good to see you, mate. It was also just a thing with all these sorts of Centurions that it all gets a little samey, but yeah, let's keep going.
All right. FV3802, the 25-pounder self-propelled gun prototype concept, not built. Then there was the FV3805 5.5-inch self-propelled gun. 2 prototypes were built with the hull reversed like the Archer, so it would drive one way but fire another. One then was converted into an artillery observation vehicle and was sitting on the Isle of Wight looking to be restored, and is in the process of being restored at the moment.
Now, Jonas is asking what beer are we drinking. So the tube's still got a little bit left in it. We've got a little way to go. We're drinking the VBs, the classic Australian lager. Not the Fosters, as Meddy's suggesting. We say to you.
You can't get Fosters in Australia, guys.
You can, but it's not easy. Anyway.
It's not easy. Right?
VB comes in 30-can blocks and it's cheap and it's actually quite well made.
John's more Australian than I am because I prefer my Japanese buddy.
Look,
Australian beers.
They're all Japanese owned, Rob.
I know they're all Japanese owned. I like the Japanese owned produced Japanese beers.
Yes.
The Australian Japanese
beers.
Anyway,
they don't come in 30-can blocks. So yeah. Anyway.
All right.
So Rob has got something special for us in the second half of the beer review, I'm sure. So we can't wait to see what that is.
I can't remember if we've done it before, but I do have an English beer. Right. So the FV4.
Right. I thought you were going to get us an Australian beer and say, what's an Australian tank? Anyway, fine.
I did consider it.
All right. God help us, Castle Lager from South Africa. That stuff's rank.
I did look at a Kingfisher extra strength, 8%.
That would have been lovely.
In the shops yesterday. I thought, that.
Kingfisher with a curry is a lovely thing. Yeah. All right.
All right. FV4002 Centurion Mark V bridge layer spanning a 14-metre gap, bearing up to 80 tonnes. Then there was the FV4003 Centurion Mark V armoured vehicle recovery engineers with a 165mm demolition gun that had a 2,000-metre range and carried
2,000-metre range with a 165.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And we have got a picture in the slide deck of that AVRE, and it's close to the old Churchill Flying Dustman. But yeah, that's a wow. Okay.
All right. James Golden is talking about Asahi's in crisis. That's only in Japan that they don't have they're in a cyber crisis in Japan. The Australian-made Asahi beers are doing just fine, thank you.
All right. Okay.
I've looked it up. Right
now, Meddy says he's never had a Japanese beer, and we say, Meddy, you need to. As with pretty much everything the Japanese do, they just do it better.
Yeah. Sapporo is my go-to. Asahi is right behind it. Anyway,
Kirin is fine. Yep.
All right. The 165mm demolition gun, basically it was there to blow holes in fortifications. But they also carried a range of various engineering tools, dozer blades, mine plows, fascine bundles. That's the big pile of sticks to dump into holes to drive over.
I just love how a big pile of sticks from early antiquity to today remains a useful engineering thing to fill in a hole and drive over
Fascist.
it.
Just remember, fascist is a big pile of sticks.
Yeah.
Mine clearance rocket launcher or beach track layer, and used in operation in 1972 in Operation Motorman, and then again in the 1991 Gulf War. Then you get FV4004 Conway with the 120mm self-propelled gun, built as an interim capability whilst waiting for the Conqueror to come out. One built before the project was cancelled in 1951. The FV4005 experimental tank destroyer with a 183mm gun by August of 1957.
Jeez, that'd knock some holes in things, wouldn't it?
The tank destroyer was dismantled but later reassembled and put on display at Bovington Tank Museum and restored to running condition. There you go.
Have they actually restored it, or I thought they were working on restoring it?
There you go.
Anyway,
well, who knows? FV4006 Centurion Armoured Recovery Vehicle Mark II with a 90-ton winch, so plenty of grunt in that winch. Then there was the duplex drive amphibious tank.
It's a bit heavy, but yep, go on.
They kept on going, and then there was the FV4010 heavy tank destroyer Malkara guided missile carrier. So they could
sounds
throw
like fun.
Yeah, they can throw some missiles out. Then we get to the fun one, the FV4018 Centurion BAV from 1963, the beach.
Which went to the Falklands.
Yep, beach armoured recovery vehicle.
Now, we've got some video that Russell Phillips shot at Bovington of the BAV running around the track. And it's the weirdest looking thing with this very high sides. But you've got to remember that it was designed to work in surf. So that's why it needed to have the high sides to keep the waves out.
It was the last Centurion variant to be used by the British Army. One vehicle was still in use by the Royal Marines until 2003 and replaced by the Hippo, which is based on a Leopard 1 chassis. The Centurion Marksman, fitted with a Marksman air defence turret. And then we get into the foreign variants.
The foreign variants. Let's go, Rob. The foreign variants.
I've kept it short.
You have. You've done a good job. You've done a good job.
Singapore Tempest. They modernised with the Israeli assistance, similar to Israeli variant with diesel engine and new main gun, and possibly reactive armour. The Tempest is highly classified within the Singaporean army, resulting in an extremely scarce amount of information about it. Then we get into the South African Oliphant Centurion tanks, redesigned and rebuilt by South Africa with the help of Israel, considered the best indigenous tank design on the African continent.
Because it's not very indigenous, but anyway.
Citations needed.
Yeah, I can't actually think of another indigenous tank design on the African continent, so that's an easy trophy, really. But yeah.
All right. Various refurbishations put a new 110 horsepower petrol engine with a semi-automatic transmission into it. Then a 750 horsepower diesel engine into it in the 70s. Then in 1991, they lengthened the hull and added additional armour on the glasses plate and the turret, and added in a V12 950 horsepower diesel engine, computerised the fire control system, laser rangefinder, and finally redesigned the turret with a South African-built 105mm rifled gun, or they also came up with a 120mm smoothbore gun.
I wonder where they got the idea for that from.
But, I mean, they did see combat against the Angolans in the South African border wars during the mid-80s. So they took out T-55s from during that time. Because they were going to get rid of the South Africans were going to get rid of them and said, what do we need these tanks for? And they put them in storage. And then suddenly, these communists are coming down from the north with Cuban support. We should pull our tanks out of storage and do something with them. Look, that was like 30 years or 20 years of sitting in storage doing nothing. Because
South Africans in the 90s used to joke that if the army took off one way and the police force, the South African police force, took off the other way, they could conquer all of Africa and re-meet in the Horn of Africa. But yeah, thankfully they didn't do that.
I think they would have had a bit of trouble because it's a big place. It's a really big. People look at the maps and say the
Mercator projection
shows
Africa's bigger than it looks.
Oh yeah, much bigger than it looks. All right.
Now, in defence of Mercator projection, if you are navigating at sea, Mercator projection is the only projection you would want to use.
The new term Global South is basically based upon the idea that half the world was in the Mercators is
made to look smaller than it is.
Smaller,
yeah, but that wasn't a political decision. That was purely a navigation decision.
But the term now is Global South, even though there's places that are way above the equator that they call in the Global South. Anyway, that's my digression.
Anyway, let's not get bogged down there.
Right. The Tariq Centurions of the Jordanian Army are fitted with the American diesel and a Belgian fire control system, which incorporates a laser rangefinder. The last of 293 conversions of the Tariq standard was completed in 1985. And now they've gone to the Dorsar, is a heavily armoured APC with front opening door. Someone's been wanting a Warhammer 40k Land Raider.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, with the Jordanian army receiving 4 of those in 2014.
No, I do think that 4 indicates it's a VIP transport.
It's a concept.
If you got 4 in inventory, there's 1 running at any time.
You got to say, I mean, obviously somebody's built them, they've got the facilities, and they've retooled them, and say, well, do we want to have any more of these?
Now, Alan's asked a question, which is a good one. Was there any cross-pollination with post-war Vickers tanks? Look, a lot of people have complained that Centurions had a lot of weird Vickers parts from the 1930s in them. And
I've always wanted to do an episode on the Vickers tanks that were never built.
Yeah, but in general, Vickers was Vickers, a bit like Rolls-Royce, is one of those exceptional British companies that actually built really good stuff. Yeah. Anyway, there was probably some cross pollination, Alan. Almost certainly some cross pollination, but nothing formal we can pin down really.
All right. Now we get into the legacy of the Centurion. Now, previously, John spoke about wanting to buy a Centurion for $25,000 in the 1980s.
Yeah. So when Australia bought the Leopard 1s, we sold off through Army surplus sales the Centurions. So literally anyone who had $25,000 could go down to an Army surplus and buy a Centurion.
And people did, as we saw with our mate Phil Hastings and others.
Yeah, but I had this idea as a 16-year-old at the time that instead of buying a car, maybe a Centurion would be a better use of my hard-earned money. And my father, showing shocking lack of vision, said, "We're not parking a Centurion on the front of the house. Sorry." So he killed my dreams. Not that I had $25,000 either. So anyway,
but. For just so you know that these days they go from between $135,000 to $155,000.
So it would have been a really good investment
in Australia.
Even if I hadn't driven it anywhere, it would have been a good investment.
I think if you can keep it driving, and you can sell it off, and you can find somebody else who wanted to buy it.
Yeah, and then there's just that. Moving house would have been a nightmare.
All right. I mean, that's at the War Memorial. We could just go up, fire that one.
Just park it at the War Memorial and see if anyone notices that there's an extra Centurions turned up.
Now, we haven't heard a lot of folks from the comments saying about what their thoughts were about why it was such a great tank. So feel free to get them in, but I'm going to give my thoughts and then John can rebut with his. So my thoughts on your earlier question as to why the Centurion was the greatest tank ever. During a time of specialist tanks in World War II, and then trying to find the next tank in the early Cold War, it met the goal of being the universal tank. Armour was good enough when used well. The guns were very good. The engine and mobility were good. The speed and range were barely adequate, but its cross-country performance and low-range torque showed that tank country is anywhere it can go. Its design and reliability meant it had longevity and comfort. But I think its best feature that I came up with was that it kept on winning. And everyone likes a winner. That's my thoughts on why it's so good.
So for mine, I think the very wide turret ring, for 1945, played a really large part in its success as that allowed upgrades as time went on. I was struck researching this episode that numerous countries found that their trainee crews could get the gun on target with less training in a Centurion. So the ergonomics and the design made it easier for tank crews to do things. And I suspect that's where the exceptional success comes from because, as we've said, the headline stats aren't particularly special, but the performance definitely is. So you have to think there's something there. And some things just worked better or were more intuitive, in the design.
Now,
Rob, tell us the most important part.
Girls on Panzer does include a Centurion because it did make it the Second World War. First as part of the Gloriana team, but then finishing in the All-Star University team, where it earned the title of the deadliest tank after taking out 11 tanks in one match. It's the second last tank to make the Girls on Panzer series, once the ARL 44 was included in it. World of Tanks seems to have a yearly collaboration with Girls on Panzer, where the St. Gloriana Centurion is available for purchase as a premium tank. The Mark 1A with the 20mm Polston gun, even though the show version mounted a 303 Baser machine gun rather than Polston. In fact, I just saw this morning the collab is actually happening again this weekend. For
how exciting! What a tie-in!
Who wants to buy a premium Girls and Panzer Centurion in World of Tanks? Now, the poll.
The poll. All right. First time in a while we've done a four-parter, which does throw the things out. So our options are the best thing about Centurion was dead patterns and T55s, the turret ring, the L7 gun, and the monowheel trailer.
Monowheel.
Now, with 14 votes counted, we have dead patterns and T55s at 29%. That would have been my vote. YouTube doesn't let me vote in these polls. Just want to say.
Get your phone out.
No, it won't. The turret ring at 7%. The L7 gun at 50% is leading the poll. And 14% of you said the monowheel trailer.
Yeah.
So 2 of you are naughty, naughty, naughty.
Would have been 3 if I'd gotten in there.
Probably boys.
I'm the one
anyway.
I'm the one who Made him put it in there.
Okay. All right. And on that note, now we've got an interview with Chris from the History of Everything channel, not podcast. It's a fascinating chat. We shot it up on Air Disaster Hill. Chris keeps drifting out of shot, but other than that, it's we hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll be back in half an hour to talk about modern developments in tanks and
the world.
and a bit of geopolitics as well.
And beer.
And beer.
We got the beer review.
Yeah, we'll get a beer review. What beer has Rob got?
Well, boys and girls, we'll have to wait and see.
Time will tell. All right, here's the interview. Hope you enjoy it. Hello folks, so we are up here on Air Disaster Hill, which is where an incredible percentage of the Australian government and military died at the start of World War II, particularly August 1940. We'll talk a bit more about what's up here, but I will bring in the rest of the team. So we are joined by Chris from the History of Everything channel. G'day.
Hello, I'm
And
Rob.
Of course. Chris, now folks, Chris does have his own microphone.
I do, yes.
Chris,
I'm here.
Can you tell us about your channel?
Okay, so I don't have a podcast. We'll start with that. But no, I cover pretty much everything from... I got big on the Soviet Navy and the Russian Navy, but I do cover a bit of everything, particularly how nation states get built. Right now I'm doing a whole month dedicated to steam engines or trains in general, because that's what the patrons wanted, so that's what the patrons are getting.
I mean, this is autistic people stuff, isn't it?
It really is.
And I'm guessing everyone in here is on the spectrum in most of our audience, so, it's fine.
Well, I'm not diagnosed, but
I
I keep getting told I should be, particularly by half my audience. So there is something to be said about that.
I think the thing that I've always thought is, one, there is no treatment, and two, you get disqualified from driving in Queensland. So
not anymore.
Oh, really? They've taken that away?
Yeah, they've taken that away.
Oh, great. Anyway, there's still real prejudice. So, Anyway, moving on.
Your website, your YouTube channel.
Yes. So the handle is @History of Everything channel. I'll send you the links. I'm sure you can flash something on screen. But we're actually, turns out we both live really close to each other, which who'd have thought?
Well, it was funny because we were at Ozama Fest, and you said I live in Canberra, and I was like, wait a minute, I live in Canberra.
It's just we had to travel 2,300 kilometres to figure that out.
Anyway, we do try and encourage local creators, although we should note you are probably about 1,000 times bigger than we are. So
I'm just
maybe
over 110,000 subs.
Yeah.
So
we're here at Air Disaster Hill, which is the hill actually between our two areas where we live. So and we've come up here in order to, on a bright, beautiful Canberra sunny Sunday morning, and we're going to talk about the history of this place, as well as your site, and some other your other thoughts about tanks, as well as steamships. And
I'm going to really upset people when I say what my favourite tank is.
Yeah, right.
We cannot wait.
Well, favourite 3 tanks. There are 3 of them.
Okay, so firstly, we're on Air Disaster Hill. You are the History of Everything guy. Do you want to quickly walk us through what's going on up here?
So set a bit of backstage first. Australia in 1939 is in a complete state. I don't think I need to overstate how much of a state we're in. By 1940, pretty much the cream of our army was in North Africa, including my great uncle. He was there, actually. I've got his medals at home. Fantastic story from him as well. I'll cover that eventually. But most of our armies in North Africa. The best of our navy, which even then couldn't stand up to Japan because it's so much bigger, is in the Mediterranean. And then most of our air force, if you could really call it much of an air force at the time, is also in North Africa. So when Japan comes knocking in about 1940 towards China, getting further and further south, and then in 1941, of course, we all know what happened, we're kind of in a bit of a state, and you have the whole country scrambling to build a defence under Prime Minister Menzies, who, it must be said, was not popular with the military at the time. He rocks up on a cruiser in the Mediterranean at one point, and the whole crew has to be stopped from shouting at him because they hate him so much. I believe that was HMAS Sydney, but it could have been Perth. I'm not 100% off the top
Those are the glory days of the Australian military, where the rank and file would shout at the higher-ups.
Oh, the best part was, after the Sydney sank the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Colodi, because alcohol was forbidden in the Australian Navy, because we kind of,
problems.
Maybe arrested our governor and overthrew the entire colony in a mutiny because they stopped us trying to use rum as currency back in the 1800s. Poor Bligh. Had to be him. Alcohol was completely banned in the Australian Navy. So when the Australian cruiser Sydney went on a 2v1 fight with 2 Italian cruisers that were faster than it, and one, sinking one of them, crippling another, they got given extra butter under order of the Prime Minister, who then rocked up and was really happy about it. So naturally, the crew wasn't very happy and spent the entire week sneaking off to the British ships that were tied up next to them.
I was going to say, the British destroyers that were part of that battle would have been breaking out the rum tots. So
they parked the destroyers next to the Sydney and put bridges across them. And then the officers just turned around and went, yeah, we don't want to mutiny. Let's just go fun. But getting on to that point, Australia's running around really, really desperately trying to build itself up. Most of our Air Force at the time, I believe, was P-40s and really early Spitfires and Hurricane. I don't know if we used the Hurricane, actually.
Spitfires came a bit later as well.
Yeah, Spitfires were a bit later, but it was we were starting to get P-40s and such.
And a huge number of pilots in Bomber Command. But
yeah, and we had a lot of experience from fighting in the European theatre. There were Gloucester Gladiators there too, which, a Gloucester Gladiator's not going to do anything against a Zero, but we ignore that. Most of the tanks in the Australian military were really, really shoddy, like second-hand British ones that we sort of just had laying around, like Vickers ones from the interwar years.
Captured Italian ones.
Which, let's put an L3 against a Hargo and see what happens. That would be interesting, actually.
Or the Chi-Ha is underrated, but yes.
It is. I'm very curious to see what would happen. That's a story for another time. And the Navy, well, we've lost a cruiser by this point, the Sydney. And it's basically 2 heavy cruisers and 3 light cruisers, and that's it. And a bunch of destroyers and smaller ships. Not enough to stop Japan. So all of the ministers are traveling back and forward around the country to build up local productions. We start building 60 Bathurst-class corvettes, the Boomerang fighter, the Wirrawee, that kind of aircraft, the Woomera. Those kind of aircraft are all being built. And of course, the Sentinel tank, which I'm sure we'll get into later. They're all starting to be built in Australia. But to do that, you have to travel to the capital to organise with Parliament. And because Australia is Australia, when we federated into a country, we couldn't agree on where to put the capital. Some wanted it in Sydney because it was first, some wanted it in Melbourne because it was richer and bigger. So we put one in the middle, because that's what you do, apparently. When you look at it militarily, it actually makes a lot of sense, because invading Canberra would be the worst thing in the world to have to do as a foreign invader, let alone getting into Australia in the first place. You'd get over the mountain ranges and then the bush.
Look, it's a twin-edged sword. Being a long way away from anywhere isn't an ideal thing about a capital, but it does make invasion harder.
It does. If the Japanese got here, put it that way, just give it up. They deserve it at that point. They put in the hard yards.
We do still have the bolt holes on the road to the coast that were built to hold the explosives to blow the road.
Yeah, and it's filled with Winnie the Pooh now. Pooh's Corner, So one of those days, a bunch of ministers for the Menzies government and quite high-ranking members of the Australian Defence Force at the time were flying into Canberra on a Hudson bomber when it decided to not fly anymore. And
which the Hudsons chose to do on
a very... Did that a lot.
They killed Emilio Earhart in an Electra, which is basically the same thing. They killed the guy who invented insulin. They killed about 20 trainees in one day in Canada.
I want to know who built them.
Well, Lockheed.
I mean, like the person at Lockheed, I
think it was an early Heinemann even, but like one of his first ones. But the other thing with the Hudson, in its defence, it was designed for commercial airline pilots who had to have, I think, 1,000 hours of flight experience before they were allowed at the controls, and putting military pilots with maybe 100 hours.
Especially in a time of war.
It led to it creating a lot more crashes than possibly it deserved. It did have some advanced features, but
And with the Canberra one, effectively, my understanding what happened, you feel free to correct me, it came into land in Canberra. It's possible that an officer with a bigwig decided, I want to fly the plane because I know how to fly planes.
Not an officer, the Minister for Air.
Yeah, the Minister for Air, that's it. Yeah, the Minister for Air.
Who had been a single-engine fighter pilot in World War I and thought he was a mad hot flyer.
Which is very different to a Hudson bomber, which I'm sure you're putting on screen now. It's either rumoured he did that or the Hudson just decided to stall, which it's known to do. And either way, it came down hard about where we're standing now, where the wing is laid out behind us in the memorial. And everyone on board was, for lack of a better term, turned into really, really crispy former humans.
Yeah, I'm just going to put up on the screen now. It's quite macabre that the Australian War Memorial has retained the charred brass that they cut off the Chief of the Army.
Yes.
And including bits of molten aluminium from the melted Hudson. So, but anyway, we don't put it on display, but they've got them.
But it's so underrated because it completely collapses the Menzies government, the first one. Menzies comes back later, but that's a post-war thing.
A whole other thing.
That's a post-war thing that gets into a whole ream of politics then.
He did become Australia's longest-serving Prime Minister in his second coming, but yes.
Yeah, and he's got
3 ministers dying, basically meant his cabinet fell apart, and when he came to the next election, he was gone.
Yeah. And sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it did lead to something pretty good, though, in Australia in a weird sort of way, because we got one of the best prime ministers we ever had for the situation. Because Curtin, love him or hate him, politically, whatever you believe in, he did a phenomenal job in battling Winston Churchill, which is now mostly forgotten. Because he spends half of the first half of his prime ministerialship fighting Winston Churchill constantly, and then giving him the finger and just recalling all of Australia's forces from North Africa, which gives us something to defend the northeast of Australia with when the Japanese finally come.
True. Anyway, that's the air disaster. We're standing on the spot of it, so I thought that would be well worth addressing. And I would also say it ripped the guts out of the top brass of the army in particular. It led to having to recall Blamey from retirement and ended up having to make him a field marshal to talk to MacArthur. And I think even Blamey would admit it would have been better if Brudenell White had not died on this hill.
I've actually been reading a biography of Blamey. It's only just come out. I can send you a link of it. It's really, really well written. I used to have a very low opinion of Blamey. I used to think he was just like a poor old man's imitation of Sir John Monash.
He was a brilliant staff officer, Monash.
Yeah, he was. But the more I read about Blamey, and yes, this biography is very biased in favour of him, but I've gone and I've read others since then who are very critical of him. I have a much higher level of respect for Blamey now, and I want to do a video on him eventually. I intend to do a big biography on him. I might do it next month because it's my birthday month. I'll do what I want. And the more I understand the man, the more I realise he was put into an impossible situation against MacArthur, who the less said about him, the better in that situation when it comes to politics, against the whole of the US military trying to force Australia into a corner to behave as a child, and also at the same time having to deal with the fact that they had next to no equipment, next to nothing being built, and he had inherited, like you said, a completely gutted command structure. So,
and he was too old.
And he was too old.
By anyone's admission, he was too old.
His own admission, he's too old. And yeah, he's a very flawed man. He's probably spent more time in the red light district in Melbourne than any other person in history.
Did he own one of the brothels?
I think he might have.
Yeah.
I don't remember. He spent so one of the reasons people hate Blamey so much is because the officer class didn't like him, because in the First World War, the officer class, no matter how pious they present themselves, they all had courtesans. They all had ladies of the French knight who they had their favourites. They were all very high-class ones, though, very fancy ones. They had great shoes, basically.
I mean, not Monash. He was into the old girls.
Yes, but they were the high-class old girls. Yeah. But Blamey didn't care, and he'd just go to the local brothel that the soldiers went to because he's like,
that's a bad move, being seen with the troops, though, isn't it?
And that's what he did. He was seen with the troops. But Blamey's whole... why not? Let's go for it. And then he gets caught, of course, in a police car with a prostitute's mouth on an appendage. And that kind of gives him a really bad reputation politically, which is why part of the reason no one wanted him in charge. But to his credit, he was actually pretty good. For what we needed at the time and what we got, he did all right. And I don't think there's much more you can say for being thrown into an impossible situation like that.
I think as the counterfactual, if this plane had not gone down on this spot, the Australian military would have been in a better state.
It would have.
Whether retaining the Menzies government would have been good or bad, that's very hard to
We would have still been leaning towards the UK rather than the US as our political...
I think by the time this happened, August 1940, I mean, I think even Menzies was aware the British Empire was dead in the water.
Yeah.
The corpse was still moving, but the heart had been ripped out.
That's the hard bit, though, because you have to wonder, because we go so far into counterfactual with this, because if Menzies doesn't do what Curtin does and doesn't fight Churchill, and by most accounts, Menzies was not strong enough to fight Churchill.
There's
those units don't come back.
There's stuff about Menzies trying to seize the British prime ministership. He was happy to fight Churchill, and Menzies won most of his battles in his life. So I don't know. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, Curtin very much stands there, and there's a famous speech which I put it on the same kind of par as Churchill's "We Will Never Surrender" speech, where Curtin stands up in front of a gigantic crowd, and this is why I put it on par with Churchill's speech, because he stands up and does it live in front of a giant crowd in Sydney. And he says, every man, woman or child, whether he or she likes it, is now at the service of the Commonwealth to defend the Commonwealth. And then the whole campaign of Fight, Work or Perish comes out. And it is a massive swing into action, and it militarizes our whole society. And you just wonder if Menzies would have done that with all of his issues with party members. Because even though he lost his party here, it was really on the rocks before that. He writes about it a couple times, Menzies himself, saying the UAP was dying. It was just, this is what did it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to know, what if, maybe this, maybe that. I mean, we can talk about Blamey, we can talk about the generals who went down here, but it really changes the course of Australian history and really Australian politics for the next, I want to say 80 or so years until now. We're only finally really breaking out of the US shadow post-Great War on Terror.
I guarantee you, we could approach 100 people in Canberra, possibly 1,000, and not one would be able to tell you this spot is here.
I'll raise you. There's 450,000 people standing behind me. I reckon we could go to half of them and they wouldn't have an idea.
Yeah.
Like, it just,
but as a percentage, I mean, it's,
No, I mean, I guarantee most people just don't know it exists. And I mean, it's a 15-minute hike past an artillery firing range to get here, so it's not that out of the way, but still.
Yep. All right, let's turn our thoughts to tanks.
Yes.
First of all, we're doing this as part of our Centurion episode, so give us your thoughts on Centurion.
I love the Centurion.
Okay,
I think it's a great tank. I know there's a lot of argument around whether or not it's the first main battle tank. I'm not tanky enough to really know about that.
It was built as a heavy cruiser, but anyway.
But my understanding of it is, who gives a crap? It's built as a cruiser tank, like you said. It did its job. So what if it's a main battle tank? It did its job. The one thing I absolutely adore about it, the little annotate that I'm doing, and I've actually got a script I need to buck up and hurry up and record, but tank nerds do scare me a little bit. But I've just dealt with train nerds, so
I've got to say, tank nerds, in our experience, and that's who we deal with, they're mostly pretty okay.
Yeah, but I have got a lot of Soviet tank nerds in the background screaming.
Okay.
There you go. But my favourite one is the Centurion that gets nuked.
The nuclear tank.
And then it goes back to war.
Hose down, wash the radiation off it.
Hose it down, wash it off, send it to war.
The crew who got back in it did all die of cancer within a few years of that, so... Anyway.
The thing I want to know about it, after getting nuked, was its armour better?
Oh, hardened.
Yes. That's the question. That is the question we need answers
I think the difference between comic books and real life is that irradiating things doesn't make them better very often in real life.
Give powers, maybe?
But like, it's a long-term weapon because you drive it through a town in North Korea, that whole town's not going to get irradiated. You got to think about it.
Yeah, okay.
No, it does. That's not how it works.
Okay.
We went to Vietnam, not North Korea.
Was it Vietnam? I thought it was... Vietnam, Okay, one of the two.
I mean, Centurions did go to Korea, but they went in British service.
That was it, It's been a while since I wrote this script.
The boat that was bringing the Centurions to Australia got diverted to Korea.
That's it,
and then we got them after they'd gone to Korea.
That's the one. But the nuke tank is one of the things I do want to cover.
The gate guard at Robertson Barracks up in Darwin.
I think it's been moved from Robertson.
Has it?
Yeah.
Has it?
Yeah.
Because the tanks have moved.
It's gone to, I think, RAF Edinburgh.
In South Australia?
Yep, because that's where they've put new armoured brigade headquarters down there, I guess.
Okay. It shows you how long ago I wrote that script.
Let me double check that because I was rereading the Centurion info.
I listened to a really good podcast about it the other day from two Australian guys. I was drinking some beers. And were
these the two old blokes in Canberra?
The sound quality on that episode was appalling, though. Cool. All right.
Favourite tanks?
Yeah, tell us about these controversial favourite tanks.
Stand over here.
Okay.
The first one is the Mark IV Mal tank from World War One.
I mean, it's very successful.
I have reasons.
And in German service.
Yes, it was. But the reason it's one of my favourites is because, one, I'm a boat nerd. I got the boat flavour of brain. And it starts as His Majesty's Landship, which I think is the funniest thing ever. And for what they achieve and what they are, I think it's remarkable. Because what Monash does with them and what other generals start to do with them by combining arms and warfare, it completely changes the game. And one of my favourite little anecdotes about it is I read a biography about Sir John Monash a while back, and I think it was in 1909. It might have been 09, it might have been 1910. He was giving a lecture to an Australian class of young officers, and his exact words were, "We need larger vehicles armed with heavier weapons to use with the infantry to break through enemy lines, and that is how we will win future wars." And everyone laughed him out of the room. 15 years later, not even 15 years later, barely 10 years later, at Le Hamel, he does it. And he does it so well.
He'd been waiting for them.
Yeah, it's like he does it so well that he completely shatters a German position, which was considered really almost impossible to take. And then he does it again and again. And I first got into that because my great-great-uncle actually died on the advance at Le Hamel.
Yeah, right.
He's buried at Villers-Bretonneux. And it made me read about the battle. And then I was like, why was this so successful when you read about things like Fromelles, you read about things like Verdun, the Somme, and they're so disturbing in the amount of casualties that they have.
Blame his staff work. There you go.
It's blaming staff work and Monash's planning.
Yeah.
And the fact that they played the politics with the king and with the British High Command so well that Americans agree to put American soldiers under Australian command. And for an Americans to agree to put their soldiers under foreign command is almost unheard of. And the fact that it was some random guy from Australia who was, above all, a Prussian-born Jew, ooh, very scary. His parents were only in Australia for about 2 years. They migrated from Prussia and they were Jewish. So there was a lot to be said about a lot of anti-Semitism that Monash faced, and that's part of the reason he never got the promotion.
Particularly from the Murdoch family?
Particularly
as in Rupert Murdoch, who was still a pain in the ass?
Yeah, and Charles Bean as well, the guy who founded the War Memorial, and he gave him hell for being a Jew. I believe at one point...
Also just not being tall and lantern-jawed. They want him to look Ben Robert-Smith.
They want him to look Ben Robert-Smith. But there is a quote from a Murdoch-owned newspaper at the time, you may have to censor this, where he's called nothing more than a dirty Hunnic Jew.
I think we can live with that.
Yeah.
In context.
We might get demonetized.
No, you shouldn't, because I'm talking about context. Speaking of, plane from the airport.
Yep.
But that's the way he's referred to, and yet he is arguably one of the most successful generals in history. And arguably. One of. I said one of. There's a lot.
The British would say the Canadian Curry was up there with Monash in Allied in...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Monash and Curry were friends.
But two of the best generals in World War I puts you as two very, very good generals.
Like, Curry and Monash were so good that they are knighted at the same time. And by dint of the
fact that... On the battlefield.
Yeah, on the battlefield. By dint of the fact that M is after C, Monash is the last general to ever be knighted by a British monarch in the field. And that kind of tells you something.
And it was the first time the monarch had given out knighthoods in the field in 300 years, I think, since the Wars of Spanish Succession.
Yeah. And that tells you something about the reverence in which Curry and Monash held. And together, I wouldn't want to be a German if they're in the same vicinity. Yeah, and that's kind of why I like the Mark IV.
So that's the Mark IV. Now, Australia actually has a complete Mark IV sitting in the Trawler Annex in Mitchell.
I know, I beated it.
And that's a real one.
Yeah.
Bovington only has a replica.
It does, yeah.
But
we also have an A7V, but that's a whole other story.
Well, that's in Brisbane.
Yes. That's where I'm from, so I've seen it a lot.
But it still strikes me as hilarious that the memorial refuses to pull it out of storage.
It was briefly, wasn't it? It was on display for a while.
In 2018, I think it came out for the centenary of those big battles. But anyway. What should or shouldn't be on display in the memorial is a much bigger fight than this podcast.
They've got a missile launcher for a Standard Missile one-off at Oliver Hazard Perry frigate. I want that on display, and I want to look at it every time it's on display.
You know that arm never worked, though.
Oh, no, it didn't. But it looked cool.
Yeah, it looked cool, but they could never make them work.
No, they couldn't.
That's why they went to tubes. No, tank number 2.
This one gets the German fans a little upset, because I maintain it's the most effective Panzer of the war.
Is it a Stug?
It's the Panzer 38T.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. No. We're big fans of the PZ-38T.
I love the PZ-38T.
Ghost Division's tank.
Yeah. But a lot of people give it crap because it can't stand up against late war tanks. I think that's a stupid reason to give it crap, because it's not built to do that.
Also, show me a 10-ton tank that can stand up against a 50-ton tank.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's built before the war by the Czechs, who, mind you, they do have a lot of industrial experience, but they're on the same level playing field, even less so than anyone else, because they don't have a lot of tank experience. They build a chassis that is so effective, it can later be upgraded to, be effectively the Hetzer. The Swedes use it as well. The Swiss used it up until like 1980. I think 1984 was when they got rid of it, maybe 83. Yeah, which is a variant of it. Show me a tank that is so effective, built by a minor power, and can do basically everything it needs to. And then when it finally gets outdated, it can be rebuilt into a vehicle that can then fight the big boys. Because, it's handicapped a bit, but the chassis can still do it. And do all of this on a shoestring budget, because it's Czechoslovakia, which is a country that didn't exist in its entity until after the First World War, that is breaking down economically because it's trying to build a country, that is under constant political pressure from its neighbors, and yet it still spurns out this beautiful little thing that can do everything it needs to. And then the Germans love it so much because it actually works compared to half of their stuff, that they use it to wipe out Poland because it's the big tank in Poland.
And France,
then
basically.
France, it completely destroys the French. Like, yes, if it comes up against a Char B or a...
If the Sharpie's
Yeah.
got fuel or the right
Yeah.
sort of castor oil, or
Or if it comes up against one of the big shahs.
Crew aren't communists.
Exactly. If it comes up against a big Shah, I mean, if it comes up against a Matilda, it's probably in trouble too. But it's not built to do that.
it can run around them.
It can run around them. It can just leave, which is what it does. And yeah, for that reason, it's probably, I maintain it's the best Panzer of the war. Any German tank nerd wherever can fight me on that.
I would go with most significant. I think.
Obviously, I would argue the Tiger is more significant just because of the mental lexicon that it causes on people.
Yeah, I mean, now we need to define our terms. Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
Tank number 3.
This is the spicy one. I maintain because of the history of it, my favourite number 3 tank is the AC-4 Sentinel, the one with the 17-pound, the big 70-pounder gun.
It's not a real tank.
It's not. It's a prototype, but it's a real tank.
It could never have been a real tank. They couldn't get the gun fits in the turret, but there's no room for the crew.
There isn't.
I like the twin 25
The 25 pounders. That's a better gun.
That looks cool. No, but I maintain the AC-4 had the potential to be amazing. It's just that it didn't have the funding, and it came at a time when
needed a different chassis and a different turret, I reckon.
I reckon they could have fixed it because I mean the stuff they do to get to the point where the AC-1 works is incredibly impressive. It's genuinely very, very impressive. The fact that this is a country that's never built a tank before, has very little experience operating them ourselves, because remember the tanks Monash using are British tanks under his command.
With British crews under his command.
With British crews, yeah. The only experience we really have is playing around with the Vickers. I think it was the 1920s. I think it was 23.
And the Bren gun carriers.
Yeah, and the Bren gun
Universal carriers. Sorry.
Oh, you've upset people. But no, they managed to throw together this tank, which has 3 engines in it, arranged in a fun way, which is kind of fun when you look at it. The running gear looks great. It looks great. It's a French influence, but it looks great, and it works. And then they start to cast it in this incredible way to make it actually work. By all accounts, we shouldn't have been able to build a tank that worked.
The metallurgy of the casting was an astonishing achievement. I would argue the fact that we had to build the world's first automatic fire extinguishing system indicates a lack of confidence in the power pack.
It does. But given what they were working with, it's really, really impressive that they managed to make this thing work. And I think the idea behind it, that it had to fight German tanks in North Africa, was stupid.
No, it had to fight Japanese tanks.
Yeah. And that was that was a lot of government influence that needed to bugger off. But if you put an AC-1 Sentinel up against a Japanese tank, 9 times out of 10, I'm putting my money on the Sentinel.
Yeah, I would completely agree that if a Japanese had established a beachhead in Queensland, I know they weren't going to, but if they had, a force of 50 Sentinels hitting that beachhead would have obliterated it.
Yeah. Or even in Port Moresby, put them in the streets of Port Moresby, Japan's going to be in a bit of trouble. Yeah. Because the Stuart itself performed incredibly well in the Philippines. The US just lacked a lot of tactics when it came down to stopping the Japanese suicide rushes with the anti-tank pogo stick things. That's it. Yeah, that's the word. So they struggled with that, and the Stuart also had some overheating issues. And of course, the Sentinel probably would have had those issues in far north Queensland or Port Moresby as well. But I maintain, you put 20 Sentinels in Port Moresby with the units to back them up, they're going to be hell for any Japanese unit trying to attack it.
I agree with you, and I know I've said as much in our Sentinel episode. I would note, though, that the Sentinel was never accepted into service, and no Sentinel was ever given an Australian Army vehicle registration number.
It wasn't.
And I think that is significant. But I take your point.
But at the same time, it makes sense that they didn't, because you've got the Lees and the Grants that are there, and you can just start to adopt them.
Which we also realised were awful and didn't want. But anyway, that's... I don't know.
I think they get more hate than they deserve for what they were and when they were built. And of course, we do some trials with the Shermans, but we never really adopt them, because by that point, there's no real point to adopt them. But
we go back to Matilda.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Matilda's better than the Sherman. Fight me, I will die on that hill. I like the Matilda more than I like the Sherman. Is it because I like it visually more? Maybe.
With the 90 mils close support version. Anyway.
I just like the look of the Matilda. Sure. It looks fantastic.
It does.
Early war period too, the Matilda was one of the few things that stopped a lot. Actually, if you look at the Matilda, the Valentine, the Grommer, all the British tanks, Russia should write a thank you letter for keeping Moscow safe to the British for that.
Oh, well, we spoke to Tank Archives about that recently. There weren't too many Matildas there, but anyway.
No, but the Valentine in the USSR is immensely underappreciated.
Yes,
for what it does.
I agree with that.
The Valentine especially, the Valentine did a lot of heavy lifting on the Eastern Front in those early years. And it's largely forgotten about because the propaganda machine puts out the T-34 is the best thing since sliced bread.
Did a lot of heavy lifting in North Africa too.
It did.
Yeah.
The Valentine is so underappreciated, and I love how it's built by like 7 guys in a shed. It's very British.
Yeah.
It's very British.
Although getting a Detroit diesel to power it helped a lot as well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's an example of how Allied cooperation works. Which is, again, why I love the Sentinel, because it's an example of someone trying to do something with no Allied cooperation.
We got the tracks.
We did get the tracks.
We got the tracks.
And a lot of designs that we got sent, we said, we can't build that here. We need something simpler.
And it's a case of a country that is completely gutted by something like this air disaster, that is completely gutted because most of its military is stuck in North Africa, that's never built a tank before, and it's turning around and churning out, by all accounts,
doesn't have an industrial manufacturing
to build this stuff. And by all accounts, it's producing a pretty good tank.
Now, we talked about this in our Sentinel episode. Do you know where we got the lathes to make the 2-pounder cannons in World War II?
I do, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
We dug it out of a scrapyard.
Yes.
South Australia.
See, this is why I love the Sentinel.
It was buried underground.
Yeah. This is why I love the Sentinel, because it's making do with what you can, and by all accounts, it's not bad. It's not the best thing ever. It's not a Panzer 38T. It's not a Matilda. It's not going to go up against a Panzer IV and win or a Stug. But if Japan rocks up with a couple Hargos, I'll put my money on the Sentinels.
Fair enough. Now, Chris,
Also, Big Gun looks cool.
That's that. As we wrap up, can you tell people where to find you and what the difference is between you and the other History of Everything?
Yeah, so for those wondering, there are 2 History of Everything channels on YouTube. One is a podcast, one is not a podcast. I'm not the podcast. It's kind of funny how it happens that we did a collab episode on his Spotify for his podcast about this. We both start at different times. So I started on Facebook, he started on TikTok, and we both had similar names. We didn't know each other existed. We started either within a few days of each other or on the same day. It was really, really close. We dated it back. But I moved to YouTube very, very quickly. And then I got really busy at work in finance because that used to be my job. Thank God it's not anymore. And then he moved over to YouTube as well, saw my channel, saw I hadn't uploaded yet, and then made his channel because he thought, well, this guy's not uploading, it'll be fine. I then started uploading, and then I started gaining traction. And yeah, before long, we found out each other existed, and it was very much the meme of the 2 Spider-Men pointing at each other going, you exist. But we get along, we chat to each other. So we are completely different people. He's an American, I'm an Australian. That's probably the biggest difference. When you notice the videos and the voices. He does a lot of geopolitics, I do a lot of other stuff. So we are different enough, but we are different people. But yeah, that's who we are. So if you look up History of Everything on YouTube, you got to look for the one with a H and an E on it with a blue circle in the middle. But I'll send you a photo to pop
I'll
up.
put a link in the thing. But also, you're the History of Everything channel.
Yes.
And he's the History of Everything podcast.
Yeah. So we're different enough. I also co-host the channel Lesser of Two Weevils with Rex's Hanger, who you may have heard of before. He does a lot of plane stuff, but we both have a bit of a special love for the Golden Age of sail, in particular stories that are often forgotten. Like I just did a large videos 2-part series on the Dunbar disaster, which ran into the rocks at Sydney Heads. No one really remembers that. It's one of the worst disasters in history. And it's linked to Canberra specifically because the owners of the Tuggeranong homestead bought it at cheap auction off the guy who died in the Dunbar disaster after his death.
Oh, there we go.
No one knows that. And the manager at the Queanbeyan Railway store died on the Dunbar as well. And the member for Monero's family died on the Dunbar.
Right.
So it's very much linked to our lives. It's just that, again, it's so long ago and world wars happened since then, so we don't talk about it too much. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris, for
No, it's
coming
been a
and joining
pleasure.
us. And we'll see you folks again next time.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much to Chris for giving us some of his time up on Air Disaster Hill. It's a very strange little location that it's still quite weird how few people understand or appreciate it. While we've been gone, Fano Gaming's joined, asking if they're late. Well, you know, you're in the middle of the show, but it seems just right.
Timing's perfect.
Yeah.
The timing is perfect.
Yes, Memes Over Dreams said they love the content. Thank you very much. We
That was a
appreciate
lovely
that.
comment. Yeah, that was very nice to see.
And Chris from History of Everything's joined. So coming to us live from Queanbeyan. Thank you, Chris. Crafty Potatoes joined from Poland. Cruiser 25 and Dark Snake have also joined the chat. So it's all going off while we embark into the
Cheers to that,
second
boys and
half.
girls.
And we still have the beer review to go. So, hang on to your hats there, folks. And we're roughly the right level of the beers. Once we get to the bottom of this, we can hit the review beers. There we go. Now, quickly, the most important thing we do in this show is
thank our wonderful
thank
patrons.
our patrons. So, quickly, to get through our fantastic folks, the Artissipateer, who get the interview early and the ad-free video and audio of the show, Brian Jenkins, Pear, Cornelius Weber, Chris Peze, Anton Gorbanov, Maxi Miss, Chicago John, Hans Vormhat, Johnny Oot, Monty, and Jacob Caban. And in the Apprentice tier, who get the ad-free audio and video of the show, David Mulvaney, Scotch 12, Floaty Burb, Steve Matthews, Jamie Stokes, Guy Hook, Jay Backman Strauss, Hans Vang, Henry Hemmed, Dan Sapienza, Christoph Keller, Tony L., Elliot Spicer, Russell Phillips, Red Rum X, Callum, Steve Brumfield, James Van Dyke, and The Rain Man. In terms of patrons and the Apple Bastardry, keep calm, carry on. But if you do feel inclined to join us as a patron, do it through a web browser and not through the Patreon app on a Apple phone, because they will take half the money. Okay, we're going to hold off beer review for a second. But Rob, you've got things you want to say?
Yeah, look, I forgot to mention last episode about more from Australian Armour Fest. We've got,
excuse me.
One of the things you can buy at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum is dice made from tanks. You can get your 7 dice, your D20, your D12, your 2 D10s.
Which gives you a percentage.
Your D100s, essentially. Your D8, your D6, and your D4 made from the armour of a tank. A Tiger, a Panther, or a Panzer IV, or there were other tanks there. For only $2,200. They seem to really know their audience well and the crossovers and who they are.
Yes.
And
we get absolutely nothing for that. This is not an affiliate link. I really wish it was.
but I just wanted to point out that if you're after some specialty dice, and I'm sure they all roll well, whatever your game systems, whether it's Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu where you want to be rolling low, or your D&D or Pathfinder where you want to be rolling high, it's there for you. All right? So... All right, now we're just going to put these ones down.
So what we have here is the Tennant's 1885 Lager. This is a product of Scotland, Rob.
Which is part of Britain.
Is part of Britain. Yes.
Britain developed and built the Centurion. Now, it's quite possible that I have done this, found this beer before.
I do not think we've done this before.
After 75 episodes, we cannot remember. So,
yeah, well, and the amount of beer we drink.
We're more than happy for people to tell me, Rob, you've done it again, you've found something good or bad.
Look, Rob, I think done it again would involve getting a beer from the completely wrong country, like the infamous Dutch beer for a Czech tank. But yes, anyway,
I have no recollection of that.
So many other people do remember that. But anyway, cut
my nails now. I can't.
Yeah, you can't open your beers. It's in a tall boy, which is always a good start. Beer is better in a tall boy. It says it's a premium Scottish lager.
Scotland.
They don't say a lot otherwise. I mean, I assume they say
1885.
They say 1885 like some sort of old school tall boy 5% lager, which seems a bit odd. But
contains gluten. There's big letters on that. Even I can read it.
I would hope so. Beer should contain gluten.
Hang on. It's okay. What's the 1556 then? Is that when the Scottish rebels?
Oh, that's Tennant's Brewery founding.
All right.
Yes. Okay, and it says it's a noble pilsner, which means they've used noble hops, which is what all lagers do. But it has fruity and hoppy touches, so we will see that when we get into it. 5%, 500 mils. This is all a good start. Tennant's used to make the worst strong lager in the world. It was about 8%. It tasted like a very bad thing.
We'll find out if they've changed. Cheers.
No, that's not great. Ooh. Ugh.
So,
yeah, I mean, look, I'll drink it. It's not so bad. It's not
that bad.
It's not a sink beer, but Lord knows it tastes like other Tennant's lagers I've had, which were not super. Okay, I'll give that a miss. But we will finish it because we are
dedicated
strong,
to our cause.
Strong, tough men. Okay, well, let's talk about things that are in the news.
You've
Yeah,
changed it.
we've got that on.
there you
Yeah,
go.
well, it's all happening,
All
right?
right.
So there was an interesting article talking about how the US has realized that, or decided that they need 4 dedicated divisions for a modern breakthrough.
Now, I read that article and I thought, okay, they're saying that these are the roles that the divisions would play, but you never want to actually stipulate that this is your role and you'll only do this role.
It seemed insane on that front to me. So the roles are, for just to bring people up to speed, you need a division for breakthrough, for exploitation, consolidation, and land sustainment. And that means you need a minimum, 40 to 100,000 men to achieve any sort of breakthrough, which is incredibly
we're talking
wasteful.
about a conventional land war with air parity. So either side could have air superiority at any time, but they have air parity overall, and whereby most of the battle is actually happening on the ground.
Now,
And taking of ground and the exploiting of ground and the consolidation, it's all happening with some air cover, but not air superiority.
But I now get that in the US Army's mindset, the division is the unit of deployment. They prefer not to go anywhere with less than a division.
I thought it was the brigade.
Brigade combat teams. They were kind of doing with that, but they've never gone away from the division. But history of everything's just commented. Sorry guys, the breakthrough has happened, so the whole division is leaving now, which is part of the problem. I would argue that within a division, your battalions should maybe be specialising in each of these things.
No, I disagree.
Or the bigger point that your troops should be capable of doing all these things.
No,
so how are you going to do a breakthrough, Rob?
Look, you might I think, to my mind, the article pointed out that there's a case of your capabilities is more about what you've got rather than what your role is. And because if you've got the tanks and the amphibious vehicles and the artillery and everything else that you need to do the role, then you do the role. If you don't have them, then it's very hard. It takes much longer to get the industry to provide you the things you need to do the role than it does to train the troops to actually carry it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the eternal conundrum that I've never seen adequately solved of, do you set the requirements for your equipment based on your doctrine, or do you get the best possible equipment and then try and build a doctrine around what you can actually build? And countries have gone both ways many times.
It's a very, smarter people than us trying to
struggle with this. Yeah.
To my mind, it's because you don't want to build for a specific thing and just limit yourself to your capabilities because you've only trained for and have the capability to do a certain thing. You want to be much more of a generalist. Being a generalist costs more, takes more training, takes more resources, but in the outcome, I feel it's a better outcome. So,
well, it's flexibility and adaptability, and those things are also super important. But the idea that you need 4 divisions to attempt to break through struck me as intellectually bankrupt.
And welcome to Tasman. Thanks
hello,
for joining
Tasman.
us from Sydney.
Good to see you, mate. Okay, what's next on the agenda? All right. Electro-optic systems, Canberra and Queanbeyan's gift to the world. So one of their systems is the Crow's, remote operated weapon system.
It sits on basically any armoured vehicle that you see around the world. Basically, it allows the crew to sit inside their vehicle and shoot and scoot whatever they feel like with optics from on a external mounted turret.
And they train their turrets. There's a building in Queanbeyan not very far from here, which has got turrets all along the front. And if you drive your car past, they'll all track you as you drive along.
And I'm sure, and they're shipping these. So they've just started developing selling lasers to the world to shoot down drones, and their big selling.
They've had a big contract. Yeah.
Well, I don't think they've actually got the contract yet, but they're saying they're going to their lasers can shoot down 20 drones in 1 minute, but they do say that out to 6 kilometers, and but they do say, and it's affected by weather, but it's how long it takes for their lasers to shoot it down. So it's a case of the lasers fire, it starts heating up the drone, until whatever wires inside of it burn through and melt for it to shut down. Now, how long that takes? Is it a second? Is it 5 seconds? Is it 20 seconds? Is it a minute? I don't know. They're not saying, but they are saying that their process is much cheaper than firing a missile or any other sort of kinetic
interceptor
at that drone or that fleet of drones that is coming towards you. And they're saying, look, for $30 million, we are going to start deploying these things. And they say that $30 million is the price of an MBT. No, MBTs cost about 10 and less.
About 10 at the moment,
10 and less type thing. So it's a cost of 3 MBTs for this function, and they're selling them off. They do have a contract. They will be writing to an unspecified NATO country, hopefully not Israel.
Well, they're not NATO, but
no, but they do like supplying stuff. Right? Anyway, so we'll find out whether or not these things work. And EOS, the Electric Optic Systems, is one of the few companies outside of the US that is allowed to build these things and do these things. So
look, they're a very, very. Look, I've got a lot of respect for them as
been going since the 80s
as a Canberra-based company, or Canberra region-based company. I know some people who've worked for them, and it really does take a toll on the mental health of their employees to be making these systems and what they get used for. But you know, until we achieve world peace, we're still going to need these industries. So lasers are, you know, it's just an interesting one because, you know, dust will stuff them up, fog will stuff them up, rain will stuff them up. You know, distance will degrade them enormously. Leaves. And yeah, some people will say, oh, well, you know, we just need to, you know, the enemy just has to put a mirror coating on everything and it'll defeat the laser. And it's like, yeah, well, you force them to put a mirror coating on everything, and that's going to cost them an absolute fortune and degrade their systems. So there's a lot of swings and roundabouts. I was watching a video where a dude was showing off a laser welder the other day, and he was using this thing.
Laser welder?
Yeah. And it was producing the most beautiful welds, and he was saying it's not that I'm a talented welder. You've still got a line of flux that the thing puts into it, but the laser is heating the flux up and the surface. And but it looked like a weapon from the end of the world when he was using its cleaning mode, because you've got to clean your surfaces before you weld them. And the laser itself is invisible, but every speck of dust flying in the path of the laser, it's lit up. It looked like something. It looked like Satan's weapon. It was really quite something, and that's a real thing. So let's not discount the lasers, but they do have some problems. Okay, Rob, what's happening with Japan?
Well, while Australia's building lasers, Japan is building railguns to shoot down missiles and rockets. So, so the electric railgun concept has been around for quite a while, and the US military and the US Navy has been trying to develop something that can fire a long way and do nasty things over a long distance and just provide the kinetic energy to a round to throw it really fast, really far, and do some damage. The Japanese have said, you know what, we're not going to try and take out ship hulls with this. We're going to use it to shoot down missiles and rockets, and it's going to be, we're going to provide enough energy to be able to do that sort of function rather than take out other ships. And so they're building it, and maybe they'll sell it to us with the Megamis. And
it's fascinating because, you know, it's little remarked on that Japan saved the Aegis program in the 1990s. The Aegis system, which is used in American warships, does amazing things with managing air defense. The US couldn't get it anything less than a 10,000-ton hull, and the Japanese took it apart and rebuilt it, and the destroyer-based systems of today.
They made it miniaturized.
They miniaturized it, and
just like they did in the 80s, buddy.
And they made it a lot saner. And the idea that the Japanese are going to take, because America's abandoned the railguns because the things destroy themselves every time they fire, and it's like, yeah, that's actually a very expensive unguided munition. Whereas if the Japanese can improve on American industry and make these things work, then the fact that
Kaizen, buddy, Kaizen.
The fact that it's a very cheap shot, will be interesting. And at some point we might see a tank-mounted railgun. But let's keep an eye on that.
That'll be on ships first. But anyway, anyway, this was yours.
This is mine. So look, the Nord Stream bombing.
Yes.
We were ridiculed at the time.
It was a couple of years ago. So refresh people's memories.
So the enormous gas pipeline that linked Russia to particularly Germany, but the whole of Europe, providing very, very cheap gas, and all of German heavy industry had been built on having this cheap gas and is suffering enormously now. It's been cut off. And some unknown parties blew up the pipeline. And Seymour Hersh, the American journalist who's been breaking big stories since the Vietnam War, came out and said at the time that this was American sanctioned, and a lot of people ridiculed Seymour Hersh, which seemed unwise, and ridiculed us for spreading his story. And anyway, as things have rolled on, Germany's trying to hunt down the people responsible. And Poland has ruled that the Nord Stream extradition is not in their interest. No. So the person in Poland that the Germans want to put on trial, who's very confusingly called Volodymyr Z, but I believe is not actually the president of Ukraine.
He's not Poland.
Yeah.
But it's a very similar name.
And I wrote this piece into the script earlier in the week, and as of this morning, the Polish court has taken on board the Polish government's advice that it is not in their interest. So this extradition to Germany isn't going to happen. It's increasingly...
Poland said that, look, Russia supplying gas to Europe is not in Europe's interest, and therefore we are against this because that was a bad deal to begin with, and you shouldn't be doing it. Therefore, we're going to oppose it by not letting you extradite this guy.
Well, yeah. All Poland's saying is that letting this guy stand trial in Germany is against their national interest, which is bloody interesting.
No, they said having Russian gas.
Okay,
they said that. They said that was a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't think Poland should get to make that decision. But anyway,
they're not the ones using it. But the point is they get to say...
But Volodymyr Z blew it up. So it's increasingly clear it was Ukrainian agents who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And to what extent that was greenlit from Washington, we'll leave as an exercise for the viewer because we certainly don't know the full truth of it. As we've said, it seems a bit on the nose that the extradition request is for a dude called Volodymyr Z. That's a weird coincidence.
All right.
Peace in Gaza. Woohoo!
Let's hope. Look, we're very happy that the Israeli Defense Forces stopped blowing up the women and children of Gaza. That's really nice. And we hope that things progress there in a sane and useful way.
It seems massively unlikely that the latter stages of this plan can possibly work. The idea that Tony Blair, as the viceroy of Gaza, will make everyone happy is unlikely.
We're not holding our breath, Jonas, but yeah, look.
So there's a couple of things one thing that's come out in this last week that seems amazing is there was a Samaritan. From the
story
of from Samaria.
Samaria.
Yeah. But the story of the Good Samaritans in the Bible, a Samaritan who had been in prison for 21 years as a political prisoner in Israel because he's opposed to the sort of Judaism that's running the joint, apparently made friends with the Hamas guys in the prison, and they said, if we're getting out, he's coming out with us. So they put his name on the list and he's been busted out.
There 20 hostages were returned to Israel, and 2,000 political prisoners of Palestinian political prisoners were released from Israeli jails.
Some would say terrorists. I mean, at this current moment in time, look, I can remember
if the January 6th guys can be
released. Yeah. But I remember in the 1980s, it was a truism then that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
Exactly.
And these days, the people we call terrorists are just the people we're trying to steal their land, and they might try and resist us. So it's a bit on the complicated side.
We're really hoping that something good comes of this.
I just hope the killing stops.
Yeah.
But I do love how Israel's saying, well, you haven't returned all the bodies, and Hamas, too, in their defence, and I don't want to particularly be in their defence because
No.
I've got a lot of problems
Bad
with
people.
Hamas.
Bad people.
But, they're saying, well, you dropped the bomb that destroyed the building. There's the pile of rubble. You've got the giant bulldozers. Why don't you go get those bodies out of there? And I have some sympathy for that point of view.
Right. Anyway, we're hopeful. Look, Donnie did good. I know.
Well, what I have so many criticisms of Donald Trump, but he doesn't actually like wars because they're bad for business.
They are bad for business. We want people who...
We want casinos. We want to build casinos and have people come and lose their money.
Love it. Make it happen.
And hopefully he can, he's meeting with Putin in the coming weeks. He's meeting with our Prime Minister on Monday, so that's going to be very exciting for Australia. We'll see how that goes.
We're gonna be selling off all our rare earth minerals because we've got a lot of them, and we've got to figure out some way to process them before China corners the market.
All right. Now there was an article in Trenchart, which is David Axe's new Substack, which it's got a lot of interesting stuff in there. They were saying that the current calculus in Ukraine is that it takes 8 Ukrainian drones to knock out 1 Russian tank. That still means about $8,000 versus $500,000, so still a pretty good deal. But it does go to the point that it's not entirely, it's not entirely a case of every drone will destroy every tank. The tanks can take a beating, which is what they're designed to do.
Especially now that they have the coat cages and everybody's figured out that. Now, Chris has said he's starting a GoFundMe for Albo's beer run after he meets with Trump on Monday night. So that'll be...
as our Prime Minister has said many times, Albo likes a beer. It's one of his more positive qualities. Now, Tank World, Rob. Let's talk about tanks. Something
Abrams
that you know
M1E3.
Yes.
E3, boys and girls.
They are promising a pre-prototype before Christmas.
Well,
Christmas this year, Christmas 2025.
This year, right? Off-the-shelf parts, Caterpillar hybrid, power plant. Now, has anybody told Pete Hegseth that it's going to be a hybrid?
It's a price, yeah.
It's going to be a hybrid, and he's going to say, I won't have none of that bloody woke bloody stuff.
It's got to burn coal.
I will not have any woke bullshit in my tanks. So, excuse my language, boys and girls.
Now, I mean, in terms of, hybrids, tanks have been sitting on the edge of hybrid electric since, World War II. The Germans played around with it a lot. Other people have tried it. No one's ever quite got it to stick. But it makes a lot of sense in that if your tank can run its systems on the battery and then fire up the engine where it actually has to move, that gives you a quieter and cooler tank. And when I say cool, I mean its temperature, because the people trying to destroy it are using thermal images. So,
Barker, well, great comment. Welcome to the comment section. Steam tanks, just like Sigma intended. Yes. That's a Warhammer reference, not a 40K reference, boys and girls.
Thank you, Barker, for that. Anyway, so it's going to be interesting. The off-the-shelf parts it's an interesting idea.
Look, I mean, I see the point. It's a case of, well, we don't have to. We'll figure out an engine and a system, but what we need to figure out is the electronics, what we're going to put in there, the armor package, and what's going to draw power from whatever power plant we put in this thing. Okay, so they've got the active protection system. We've got the all the integration systems. How much power do we need for those? Can we provide that power in our hybrid and cut down everything else except for the armor required? So they want to go from what is now a 78-ton tank to at max 60-ton tank, which is a huge. Yeah,
it's still too heavy. They've got to get the baseline design down to 40 to be useful. But
it's still a huge jump and opens possibilities for the Abrams. And I said, well, okay, and we also need cope cages and the active protective systems and everything else. And how do they do that and lose all the weight that they need to do at the same time? And making it 40% more fuel efficient by having the hybrid. It's going to be it's a challenge, but look, they could do it because if they start from scratch rather than saying, okay, we need to, but they've got the chassis. and just what you throw into
Well,
that chassis.
it's a lie to call this an Abrams. It's not. It's a totally new tank, and a bit like the way the Super Hornet is in no way a evolution. Okay, it is an evolution of the Hornet, but it's a totally different plane. It's bigger, it's heavier, whereas this is supposedly lighter. The ideas are great. One of the fun things I find interesting is what they really are keen to do, and why they're rushing the pre-prototype out, and apparently they're going to have a full platoon of these things by the end of next year, is to get actual troops in giving actual feedback. And troop feedback is useful if you want to keep operating a tank the way you've operated in the past. Troop feedback is less useful if you're trying to pioneer a whole new thing.
I feel that having a platoon developed for next year is more of a political thing, saying we get things done. That is, I think that is the outcome that they're showing this as saying a lot. The other party in America promises things and thinks about things. We get stuff done.
Yep.
Right, is the point that I think they're trying to make, saying we build things, and there is nothing is going to stop us from going from A to B whereas the other party always stops in the middle of says, but has anybody thought of X? When has anybody thought of the trees when developing this thing? Yeah. It's a case of it's stupid. But
we
we
still have the weird situation that Britain has not built a new tank chassis in 30 years. The US has not built a new tank chassis in 30 years. The only people who've built new tank chassis in 30 years are the
China.
Germans, the Chinese, the Japanese, and the South Koreans. And the Indians, although not a very good tank chassis.
But they've got one. All right, anyway, we're going to move on from that. And, all right, John, this one's yours.
Yep, sure. So apparently, and this is another Trenchard story, Russian troop losses are exceeding their recruiting by 20,000 per month. So what we're seeing at the moment around particularly Pokrovsk is huge assaults. They are throwing. It looks like a last gasp, frankly. They're throwing everything at it, hoping to move the needle. If they can take Pokrovsk, they can force the Ukrainians a long way back, and then they'll. The peace deal will be more favourable to them.
Like the British in the Suez Crisis, they're going for that, taking as much ground as they can before the peace talks start happening. Yeah, and I feel that's kind of where it's at. Saying, look, but Putin is meeting Trump next week as well, because Trump said he's going to give tomahawks to Ukraine, and that was ticked a special trigger within Russia to say, we don't want them having tomahawks.
Well, the big trigger is that the tomahawks can hit Moscow, and particularly can hit the Kremlin.
And they can avoid air defences.
They are slow though,
but they can avoid things. I mean, they're smart enough to be able to. That's the whole point of it.
They fly very low, and they've got an amazing topography. Topographic mapping. So they scan the terrain in front and slide between them.
Zelensky has yesterday was really talking to Trump, saying, "Look, we'll give you lots of drones if you give us some tomahawks." Because Trump had said, "Look, we're going to take the tomahawks off the table because I'm meeting with Putin next week." This is a huge tipping point. But it's good to know that Trump now knows that it is a negotiating tactic for Putin, is that tomahawks on the table or off the table, he'll bring them. He'll open the conversation.
Look, it was a very bad sign that this morning Australia time, it was on our TVs. Zelensky was giving a press conference after his meeting with Trump on the, he was literally across Pennsylvania Avenue. There was no splitter box for the media, so there were a million microphones in his face, and it looked improvised, which is a bit worrying. Because I want the best for Vladimir Zelensky and Ukraine. I want to be really clear about that. That did not look good. We'll see how it turns out when the meetings happen. One thing that's coming out of this is there is some small hope that every other country in the world might look at the numbers coming out of the bloodbath in Ukraine and conclude that invading their neighbours is a bloody stupid idea. And maybe we can hope that it's going to have some positive effect into the future. I think the Chinese have looked at the bloodbath in Ukraine, and they found it sobering. That's not a quagmire they want to get into. But it still looks like the 2027 Taiwan War is on the table. So we'll see what that happens. And I just want to close with the murder on the high seas that's happening in the Caribbean at the moment. Because
it's not even pirates.
Sorry?
It's not even pirates with bloody magical powers.
Why can't we have some pirates?
With magical powers.
It's an alarming development that the US is using long-range missile strikes to blow up boats in the Caribbean, and they are killing people without any due process, which is murder. It's not war. It's not self-defense. It's not anything. It's just killing people. And frankly, Barack Obama should have stood trial for the way he started this with drones. He wasn't the first, but he made it in an industrial thing. There's just a kill list, and there's people ticking off boxes, and people die, and families lose their loved ones as a result. I'd really hope that someday everyone who does this
we are
will...
very grateful that we're in a country where we don't have these things, whether you're Qatar, Doha, anywhere in the Middle East, that suddenly a US bomb could be coming in through your window and blowing up just because you live in an apartment next door to an Israeli bomb comes in your window because you live next door to somebody who might happen to work at a facility that they want to kill somebody off at.
A few years ago, I worked with a young woman who was studying law, and the police kicked her door down at 4 a.m. She was a little shocked about this, and 20 minutes in, she was like, well, actually, can I look at the warrant? Because she was doing a law degree, and she was like, actually, I know that you have to show me the warrant. And when they showed her the warrant, she said, yeah, you're in the wrong address. This is for the house next door. And the guy next door has seen all the blue lights and the kicking in, and he'd made off for the hills. Just accidents can happen. And the idea that you're using lethal force with no verification that it's the right people is terrifying. It surprises me to have to say this, but outside of a war zone, execution should only follow an extensive process of law. And I would also say that in most parts of the world, execution is not a legitimate outcome at any process of law. You put them in a prison. You catch them, you put them on trial, and you put them in a prison. You don't just fire missiles and blow up boats that you've got no verification if you've got the right boat. It's very upsetting. Yes. Okay. That's us. That's the end of the show. It's been a very long one. It's coming up on one of our longest, but Centurion deserves it.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Yes. Anyway, I hope you folks all enjoyed it. We hope people have got some value from this. Thanks very much, Chris, for the halftime interview. And on that note, we will see you next month with who knows what tank we'll come up with.
Throw in suggestions, boys. Let's go to a poll just to
firm up. The numbers have moved heavily in the poll. So the best thing about Centurion, so at the moment,
it's very close with 27 votes. We've got Dead Patents and T55s at 33%, the Turret Ring at 11%, the L7 gun at 37%. But the monowheel trailer, 19%. All right, so the L7,
which I think is 3. No, it's more than that. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
The monowheel, boys and girls. Mm-hmm. Who else could have come up with that except the British?
Tasman wants the Panzer II for the next one.
There you go.
That's an interesting idea, Tasman.
Anybody else wants to throw in their ideas? We're happy to look at them.
Chuck them in the comments. All right, folks. It's been awesome. We really appreciate you, and we'll be back next month. Cheers.